Hello everyone, my name is Rain. I'm not a rich woman mistreated by my mother-in-law, but I was mistreated by my own parents. This story is about my useless husband, Charlie, and how my parents supported him more than they ever supported me. I've never told anyone this story before because I don't have many people in my life. I met Charlie about 6 years ago on a dating website. He had a decent job and seemed like a good guy. Charlie wasn't some knight in shining armor, but he was definitely a good boyfriend. We had some great years together at the start of our relationship. We dated for 4 years and then got married. He was a great partner to me and quickly became my parents' favorite. However, I did feel some resentment towards him because of that. At every family dinner, my parents would say things like, "We're so happy to have you in our family, Charlie. Rain finally made a good choice in life by bringing you to us. God really answered our prayers and gave us what we wanted. You know, we'd always wanted a son but never had one. You're such a nice young man and perfect for our family. Yes, Rain is okay and all, but she can't be our son. She doesn't understand that. Rain has always been a little selfish and greedy for attention. We're glad you stuck with her despite her flaws." They were right. I was selfish and greedy for affection. My parents always wanted a son and couldn't have one. They even tried for a bit after having me, but it wasn't possible. It made them resent me throughout my life. When I was young, I couldn't understand why they neglected me and favored other children if they were boys. They always complained about me and how they missed out on having a son. As I grew up, I was determined to prove to them that I could be just as good as a son. I got great grades, went to college, and got a good job. I even sent them monthly allowances so they wouldn't have to work anymore. Still, they never appreciated me. Charlie did nothing for them, but they loved him more than me. I tried to push aside my resentment because I was happy that my parents finally approved of one choice I made. Charlie also enjoyed the attention he got from my parents. His own parents had disowned him, and I didn't know why. None of his relatives even came to our wedding. Slowly, I started to understand why almost everyone in his life cut him off. He was a thief. I wish I were exaggerating, but I'm not. At first, it started off as him being lazy. One day, he suddenly took a lower-paying job because he didn't want to work long hours anymore. He said it was to avoid getting depressed, so I decided to switch jobs at my company and took a lower position with a pay cut to help out. "Why would you do that, Charlie? This is a serious pay cut and it will affect our life," I said. "Why would it affect us? You earn well enough to support our lifestyle. Just put more money into our joint account. That would solve everything," he replied. "You can't just assume that, Charlie. Things like this require a family discussion. If you want more money from me, you should have discussed it with me first. Do you have no regard for my mental health? Why would I even discuss this with you? We're married, so there's no my money or your money anymore. Stop being so dramatic," Charlie said. I was a bit annoyed by how casually Charlie was acting about the whole thing, and the fact that he refused to separate our finances worried me. But I still supported him because I loved him. That was one of the biggest mistakes I ever made. Guys, this man spent all his money and time on video games. Yes, whatever little money he earned was spent on them. He put $500 into our joint account, but later he took out even more for himself. Charlie and I had countless arguments about this in the past. He was draining my savings and taking almost all of my paychecks. Sometimes he didn't even contribute anything to the household. He didn't help with chores either. All he did was work, play games, and spend money on things he wanted. I was getting sick and tired of being financially taken advantage of. No amount of talking ever helped. Instead, he always turned things around on me and yelled at me. My parents also took his side. They said, "Rain, why is your husband calling us, saying that you are financially abusing him? This is very unlike you, Rain. You better explain yourself." "Dad, I'm not financially abusing him. In fact, it's the opposite. He's been draining my savings and making me pay for 90% of our household expenses." "So what, Rain? People need to spend money on their family after marriage. It's shameful how you don't let Charlie use your credit card. You're punishing him for not having a fancy job like you. How did you become so greedy?" "Mom, he's misused my credit cards before. That's why I don't let him use them anymore. I can't risk our future knowing he has no control over his spending." But my parents still took Charlie's side. That made me even angrier. I knew he was using my parents to make me give him all my money. Little by little, all the love I had for him faded away. But one day, things reached a breaking point. I discovered that he had taken $20,000 from my personal account without permission. What did he spend it on? A new gaming PC and accessories. I was furious. I tried to get the charges canceled, but it didn't work. So, as a last resort, I decided to report it to the police. Charlie was furious when they came to arrest him that day. I was determined that my marriage had to end. I needed to get out. What I didn't realize was that I would lose more than just Charlie because of my decision. I texted my parents to tell them what happened. I didn't want them to hear about it from someone else, so I told them that night. They saw the messages but didn't reply. I was a little worried about their silence, but I was too exhausted to think about it, so I went to sleep. The next morning, I woke up and saw a text from Charlie. He said, "Hey wife, I'm already out of jail. Are you surprised? Well, I am too. I never thought your parents would be the ones to bail me out." "What? My parents bailed you out? That's impossible. They would never do that to me." "You're wrong, Rain. One call from me, and your parents were eager to help me out. They even cursed you out while they were at the police station. I must say, they're very disappointed in you." Hearing those words made my stomach turn. I didn't want to believe that my parents would do something like this. I rushed over to their house to get answers. I had no idea why they had bailed Charlie out. I had tried to keep them as uninvolved as possible. But they still managed to talk to Charlie and pay for his bail. I was getting really angry thinking about what they did. I walked into my parents' house and said, "Mom, Dad, please don't tell me you bailed Charlie out. Don't tell me what I heard is true. I can't believe you could do something like this, Rain. We raised you better than that. You're just punishing Charlie because he didn't listen to you. After marriage, he has every right to use your credit card. All your money is his money too. He did nothing wrong," my dad said. "Dad, he stole from me. He took $20,000 from my accounts, and this was after he had already emptied our joint account in the past. When does it stop?" I replied. "We know you've been financially controlling towards him, Rain. It's not right to shame your own husband for spending money. You were a bad wife to him. Charlie told us how you refused to put more money into your joint account. Spouses shouldn't hide their money from each other." "Charlie doesn't hide anything from you," Dad insisted. "Charlie didn't hide money because he had nothing to hide. After every paycheck, he had no money left. He barely contributed anything to our household expenses." "Oh my God, are you shaming a man for earning less than you? What can poor Charlie do when he earns so little?" "I can't believe what a greedy and selfish brat you've become," Dad said angrily. No matter what I said, my parents still supported Charlie. I should have seen this coming. They'd always preferred him because he was a man. Charlie filled that gap in their hearts from not having a son. Having a good and successful daughter wasn't enough for them. Still, I thought they wouldn't choose any man over their own child. I was wrong. My parents were completely hopeless. Their words hurt me when they blamed me. I was disappointed and sad, but I wasn't ready for what they said next. "Rain, you have truly turned into a horrible woman. We're ashamed of what you've become. We can't be associated with such a selfish daughter like you, so your father and I have made some decisions. We've invited Charlie over to our house. He'll be staying with us until you come to your senses. We'll pay for his lawyer fees and everything. You'd better drop the case and take him back, or we'll disown you. You're going to house the man who stole from me and financially abused me for years? Are you really going to disown me over this? You can't be serious." "We are dead serious, Rain. It's time we taught you a lesson. Just because you're financially independent doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. Charlie has been such a good son-in-law to us. It's time we stand up for him and help him out in this tough time. He's already like a son to us, so we'll let him stay with us until you realize your mistake." Nothing could have prepared me for this. I thought my parents were biased towards my husband, but I never thought they would disown me for him. They constantly praised my abusive, freeloading husband for his wrong decisions and belittled me for being responsible. What they said that day completely shattered my heart. All the love I had for them was gone. I realized that all my life I had been loving the wrong people, but I wasn't going to let them take advantage of me anymore, so I said, "Fine then, have him in this house. But if he comes to live here, I will stop sending you money. I won't pay you a cent, so you can go and spend it on my loser husband. We expected that from you, Rain. We already know what a selfish person you are. You don't have to send us money. We can take care of ourselves. It's just like you to threaten us with money. Listen to me, Rain, you can't use your money to control us. The money you earn has made you proud. We'll show you what a mistake you've made by using your money to manipulate people. There's no reason for us to stay in contact with you. Don't come to this house or talk to us again. I looked at my mother, and she agreed with my dad. Both of them told me to go away and never show my face again. They'd even said I shouldn't call or text them. I took their words to heart and left the house. I didn't cry in front of them, but I broke down in my car. I cried so much that I had to pull over to calm myself. I spent over 30 years of my life trying to win my parents' love, and yet they threw me away like trash. They treated me like trash and called me trash. I felt like my world had ended that day. I went home and cried myself to sleep. The next day, Charlie called me just to brag about how he'd stolen my parents. He was already settled into my old room and called to tell me how much my parents hated me and loved him more. He said, "Guess what, Rain? I'm in your precious room right now. Your parents even came to pick me up. They really hate you right now." I replied, "Charlie, you're being rewarded for your crimes. It must be fun having loving parents who aren't even your own." He said, "It was so easy to manipulate them, Rain. I didn't even have to try. You ran after them like a dog, but they never loved you like this. Honestly, I think they hated you all along." Poor little Rain worked so hard to make her parents love her and still failed miserably. I couldn't take it anymore, so I hung up while he laughed at my misery. That horrible man even had the nerve to send me a picture of him lying on my old bed. I wanted to cry, but instead, I pulled myself together and made a plan. I was going to follow through with my promise of not sending my parents any more money. I knew the absence of my allowance would hurt them, plus Charlie would eventually show his true colors, so I stopped sending them money and waited. As I predicted, just 2 days after the month ended, my parents started pestering me for money. They broke their own no-contact order and began asking, and demanding, that I send them money. They said, "Why haven't you sent us money yet? Do you know how many bills we have?" I replied, "What money, Dad? I already told you I won't send you money anymore. Funny to see you contact me after you proudly told me to get out of your life." Rain, don't be rude. Things were said when we were all angry. It's been weeks since that incident. It's time to move on. Families don't hold grudges. So now that you need money, you suddenly remember I'm family? Yesterday, Charlie seemed more like family to you. Why don't you ask him for money? That won't be possible, Rain. He doesn't pay for anything. We paid his bail, his phone bill, and his food. He's still asking us for money. Well, use your savings to feed him then. I'm sure you've saved some from the checks I used to give you. We already dipped into our savings when we paid for Charlie's bail. We have very little left. We need you to send us money, Rain. It's not fair for you to hold the past over us. No, this is completely fair, Mom and Dad. For years you've treated me unfairly because I'm a girl. You chose Charlie and loved him only because he's a man. I tried so hard to be a good daughter, to win your affection, but you two just showed me how wrong I was. I should have done this a long time ago. I'm cutting you off. I don't need people like you in my life anymore. Years of hurt and betrayal poured out of me. I absolutely unloaded on them, telling them exactly how angry I was. My parents were silent while I spoke. When I finished, they started pleading for forgiveness because they really needed my help. I hung up on them without listening any further. I had predicted that my parents would come banging on my door with apologies and pleas. I even expected some entitlement on their part. But my revenge became even sweeter because Charlie did something stupid that made my parents file a police report against him and kick him out. If you want to know why, you need to see this conversation I had with them. One day, they showed up at my doorstep to try and talk to me. I didn't open the door but spoke to them from inside. They said, "Rain, you need to hear us out, dear. We're here to apologize for our mistakes. We never should have let an outsider into our home. You are family, and you should have been our priority. We got caught up in our dream of having a son and didn't realize how bad your husband was. We've already paid dearly for it. Charlie stole our credit cards and drained our savings. We don't even have money for food anymore. Rain, please don't let your parents starve. We need your help. We promise we'll stand by you this time. We've already reported the theft to the police and kicked Charlie out. He'll never step foot in our lives again. I replied, you should have thought about this when you happily chose Charlie over me. You're the only ones responsible for your situation now. I will only send you money for this month, but after that, I'm done. You have a month to figure out what to do. I said that and left them on the porch. I felt a little bad for my parents, but then I remembered how little I meant to them. That was enough to make me angry again. I did send them some money because I couldn't let them starve, but that was the last check I sent them. Just as they said, my parents filed a police report to get the charges reversed on their credit cards. Surprisingly, they sent back the money I'd sent them last time. They kept begging and pleading with me for forgiveness. The begging went on for so long that I started to get used to it. I saw it coming but didn't expect them to be so persistent. However, what they did next was even more unexpected. They actually signed over their house to me as an apology for all the mistakes they made against me. My parents showed up on my porch and left the papers there. I didn't know what to think. Apparently, they also got jobs so that I wouldn't have to spend my money on them anymore. I returned the papers and haven't contacted them yet. As for my husband, well, he's my ex-husband now. Yes, I filed for divorce and got him sent to prison for fraud. With a double case against him, Charlie's chances of avoiding jail were slim. Just as predicted, the judge put him in prison.
The shrill ring of the phone pierced through the thick veil of grief that had consumed me since Derek's passing. Reluctantly, I reached for the receiver, my hand trembling with a mix of dread and curiosity. "Lila, it's Eleanor," the stern voice at the other end announced, devoid of any warmth or condolences. My heart sank as I recognized the steely tone of my late husband's mother. Even in my darkest moments, she found a way to intrude, her presence as unwelcome as ever. "What do you want, Eleanor?" I mustered, my voice strained with barely concealed contempt. "I need you to move in with me," she stated matter-of-factly, as if making a simple request for groceries. "It's your duty as a daughter-in-law to care for me now that Derek is gone." I recoiled at her audacity, anger rising within me like a tidal wave. "Are you serious? Derek just died, and you're already trying to control me? I'm not your servant, Eleanor." "Don't take that tone with me, young lady," she snapped, her words dripping with disdain. "You owe me for all the sacrifices I've made for this family." I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to hurl the phone across the room. "You've done nothing but belittle and undermine me since the day I married Derek. Why should I subject myself to more of your abuse?" "How dare you speak to me like that?" Eleanor's voice rose to a shrill pitch, her rage palpable even through the receiver. "After everything I've done for you, this is the thanks I get? You ungrateful, selfish girl." "Enough," I shouted, my patience finally snapping. "I don't owe you a damn thing, Eleanor. Derek is gone, but that doesn't give you the right to dictate my life. I'm not coming to live with you, and that's final." With a defiant click, I slammed the phone down, severing the connection with a sense of empowerment I hadn't felt in years. Eleanor's toxic grip on my life had finally reached its limit, and I was determined to break free, no matter the cost. As I sank back into the couch, tears streamed down my face, a potent mix of grief and liberation. Derek's passing had left a gaping void in my heart, but it had also presented an opportunity, a chance to reclaim my identity and free myself from the shackles of Eleanor's cruelty. The words she had hurled at me echoed in my mind, a painful reminder of the countless times she had belittled and demeaned me, even in Derek's presence. But this time, something was different. A fire had been ignited within me, a burning desire to stand up for myself and confront the demons of my past. With trembling hands, I reached for a pen and paper, determined to put my defiance into writing. Eleanor's reign of terror would end, and I would emerge victorious, no matter the cost. As I set down the pen, my mind drifted back to the countless times Eleanor had made my life a living hell. Her words, sharp as daggers, had left invisible scars that ran deeper than any physical wound. One memory, in particular, resurfaced with a vengeance. It was the night Derek and I had gathered the courage to share our struggles with fertility, a moment that should have been met with compassion and understanding. "Mother, Lila and I have something to tell you," Derek had said, his voice heavy with trepidation. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, her lips pursed in a thin line of disapproval. "Well, out with it then. I haven't got all day. I swallowed hard, steeling myself for her reaction. We've been trying to conceive for over a year now, but it hasn't been easy. The doctors say I may have issues with... Enough, Eleanor cut me off, her tone as cold as ice. I don't want to hear about your feminine troubles, Lila. This is what happens when a woman puts off having children for her career. Derek's face flushed with anger, but before he could speak, Eleanor continued her tirade. I sacrificed everything to raise my family, and this is how you repay me? By denying me the joy of grandchildren? Mother, that's enough, Derek snapped, but his words fell on deaf ears. Eleanor turned her withering gaze on me, her eyes burning with contempt. Mark my words, Lila, if you can't give me grandchildren, you'll never be a true part of this family. The memory still stung like an open wound, a stark reminder of the emotional torment Eleanor had inflicted upon me. Her words had cut deeper than any knife, leaving me feeling inadequate and unworthy of Derek's love. But now, with Derek gone, Eleanor's cruelty had reached a new level of audacity. How dare she demand that I move in and care for her, as if I were her indentured servant? Anger coursed through my veins, fueling my determination to stand up to her once and for all. I would no longer cower in fear or shrink from her vile insults. With a newfound sense of resolve, I picked up the pen and began to draft a letter, a defiant declaration of my independence. Eleanor would learn that her reign of terror was over, and I would no longer be a willing participant in her twisted games. The words flowed effortlessly, each sentence a testament to my newfound strength and resilience. I would not be cowed by her demands or intimidated by her threats. This was my life, my future, and I would shape it on my own terms. As I sealed the envelope, a sense of empowerment washed over me. This was just the beginning, a simple act of defiance that would ignite a firestorm of consequences. Eleanor had underestimated me for far too long, and now she would face the wrath of a woman scorned. With a newfound determination, I slipped the letter into the mailbox, setting in motion a chain of events that would forever alter the course of my life, and my relationship with the woman who had once held such power over me. Days passed with no word from Eleanor, and I began to wonder if my letter had fallen on deaf ears. Perhaps she had finally accepted my decision and resigned herself to the fact that her control over me had come to an end. That naive hope was shattered one morning when the doorbell rang with a furious cadence. Hesitantly, I approached the door, peering through the peephole to see Eleanor's seething form on the other side. Taking a deep breath, I unlatched the lock and swung the door open, bracing myself for the onslaught. "How dare you?" Eleanor spat, her eyes blazing with fury. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? With disrespect and ingratitude?" I squared my shoulders, refusing to shrink from her wrath. "I owe you nothing, Eleanor. Derek is gone, and you have no claim over my life anymore." "No claim?" she seethed, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "I am your mother-in-law, and you will show me the respect I deserve." "Respect?" I scoffed, my own anger rising to the surface. "You've done nothing but belittle and demean me since the day I married Derek. When have you ever shown me an ounce of respect?" Eleanor's face contorted with rage, her lips curling into a sneer. "You ungrateful wretch! If it weren't for me, you'd have nothing. Derek was too good for you, and now you've thrown away your last chance at being part of this family." "I am not your property, Eleanor," I stated firmly, my voice unwavering. "I don't need your approval or your dysfunctional idea of family. I'm my own person, and I won't let you control me anymore." Eleanor's eyes narrowed, her gaze cold and calculating. "You'll regret this, Lila. Mark my words, I'll make your life a living hell. No one turns their back on me and gets away with it." With those chilling words, she turned on her heel and stormed away, leaving me standing in the doorway, my heart pounding in my chest. I had done it. I had faced my tormentor head-on and refused to back down. A sense of exhilaration coursed through me, mingled with a twinge of trepidation at Eleanor's parting threat, but I would not be deterred. For too long, I had lived in the shadow of her cruelty, allowing her to dictate the terms of my life. No more. This was my moment of defiance, and I would savor every second of it. As the adrenaline subsided, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride welling up within me. I had stood my ground, defended my autonomy, and emerged victorious. At least for now. Eleanor's words still echoed in my mind, a chilling reminder that this was far from over. She was a woman scorned, and I knew better than anyone the depths of her vindictiveness. But I was no longer the meek, cowering woman she had once known. Derek's passing had awakened a fire within me, a burning desire to reclaim my life and my self-worth. And if Eleanor thought she could extinguish that flame, she was sorely mistaken. With a newfound sense of determination, I closed the door on the past and all its demons. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was ready to fight, not just for myself, but for the future I deserved. In the weeks that followed, an uneasy truce settled over my fractured relationship with Eleanor. She had retreated into sullen silence, no doubt stewing in her bitterness and plotting her next move. I, however, refused to let her threats diminish my newfound sense of freedom. That fragile peace was shattered one Sunday afternoon when Derek's sister Claire invited me to a family gathering at her house. Despite my initial hesitation, I decided to attend, determined not to let Eleanor's toxicity dictate my life any longer. The moment I stepped through the door, I could feel Eleanor's icy glare boring into me from across the room. Her eyes narrowed as I made my way towards Claire, exchanging warm hugs and greetings with the other guests. "Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence," Eleanor sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The ungrateful daughter-in-law who turned her back on her family." A hush fell over the room as all eyes turned towards us, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation I knew was inevitable. "I am not ungrateful, Eleanor," I replied, my voice steady and unwavering. "I simply refuse to be manipulated and controlled by you any longer." Eleanor let out a derisive cackle, her lips curling into a cruel smile. "Manipulated? Is that what you call filial duty? You owe me everything, you selfish girl. If it weren't for my sacrifices, you'd have nothing." "That's enough, Mother," Claire interjected, her brow furrowed with concern. "Lila has been through enough without you adding to her pain." But Eleanor was relentless, her barbs striking with precision. "Pain? She knows nothing of true pain, not like the anguish I've endured watching my son's legacy wither on the vine thanks to her failures." I could feel the weight of her words like a physical blow, stirring up old insecurities and wounds I thought had healed. But this time, something was different. A fire burned within me, fueled by a newfound sense of self-worth and determination. "You're wrong, Eleanor," I stated firmly, my voice carrying through the stunned silence. "I may not have been able to give Derek children, but that doesn't make me a failure. My love for him was pure and unconditional, something you've never understood." Eleanor's face contorted with rage, but before she could respond, I pressed on, emboldened by the support of the onlookers. "You've had a twisted hold on this family for far too long, using guilt and manipulation to get your way. But I refuse to be a part of your dysfunction any longer. I am my own person, with my own dreams and ambitions, and I won't let you or anyone else diminish that." A murmur rippled through the crowd as Eleanor's mask of superiority began to crack. Her eyes darted from face to face, desperately seeking allies, but finding only expressions of shock and, in some cases, admiration. In that moment, I knew I had won a decisive victory, not just for myself, but for all those who had suffered under Eleanor's tyranny. The veil had been lifted, exposing her true nature for all to see, and there was no turning back. As Eleanor stormed out of the room, her face flushed with humiliation, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The shackles of her control had been broken, and I was free to embrace the future on my own terms, without the specter of her cruelty looming over me. It was a pivotal moment, a turning point in my journey towards self-discovery and empowerment. And as I looked around at the faces of my newfound allies, I knew that the battle had only just begun. The aftermath of the family gathering was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. On one hand, I felt a sense of triumph, having finally stood up to Eleanor and exposed her manipulative ways. But on the other, I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger battle. As if on cue, my phone rang the following day, and I braced myself for another verbal assault from Eleanor. To my surprise, it was Claire's voice on the other end. "Lila, we need to talk," she said, her tone laced with urgency. "Can you meet me for coffee?" An hour later, we were seated at a secluded corner of a cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting between us. "I wanted to apologize for Mother's behavior," Claire began, her eyes clouded with shame. "What she said to you was inexcusable, and I'm sorry you had to endure that." I offered a small smile, touched by her sincerity. "It's not your fault, Claire. Eleanor has always been—" I trailed off, searching for the right words. "A vindictive, manipulative tyrant?" Claire finished for me, a rueful chuckle escaping her lips. "Believe me, I know better than anyone." My brow furrowed as I studied her expression, sensing a deeper story lurking beneath the surface. "What do you mean?" Claire took a deep breath, her fingers fidgeting with the handle of her mug. Growing up, Mother was relentless in her pursuit of perfection. Nothing we did was ever good enough, and she made sure to remind us of our flaws at every turn. A pang of recognition tugged at my heart as I listened to her words, memories of my own experiences with Eleanor's cruelty flooding back. Simon and I learned early on that the only way to survive was to either conform to her impossible standards or risk being cast aside, Claire continued, her voice tinged with bitterness. I chose the former, sacrificing my dreams to become the perfect daughter she demanded. "And Simon?" I prompted, sensing there was more to the story. Claire's expression darkened, her eyes clouding over with a mix of sadness and anger. He refused to bow to her will, and for that, Mother made his life a living hell. She belittled him, criticized his every move, and even tried to turn Derek against him. My heart clenched at the thought of Eleanor's cruelty extending beyond just me, her venom poisoning the lives of her own children. "That's why I wanted to talk to you," Claire said, her gaze locking with mine. "You're not alone in this fight, Lila. Simon and I were with you every step of the way." A wave of relief washed over me, and I realized that in my quest for independence, I had gained something even more valuable: allies who understood the depths of Eleanor's toxicity. "Thank you, Claire," I said, reaching across the table to give her hand a gentle squeeze. "With you and Simon by my side, I feel like I can take on anything Eleanor throws at me." Claire's lips curved into a rare, genuine smile. "That's the spirit. Mother may think she's invincible, but she's about to learn that she's messed with the wrong family." As we parted ways, a newfound sense of determination coursed through my veins. Eleanor had drawn the battle lines, but she had unwittingly assembled an army against her. An army united by a common goal: to break free from her tyranny once and for all. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but for the first time in my life, I didn't feel alone. With Claire and Simon by my side, I was part of something larger than myself, a movement fueled by the desire for justice and the pursuit of freedom from Eleanor's toxic grasp. And as I stepped out into the warm afternoon sun, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope ignite within me. The tide was turning, and Eleanor's reign of terror was about to meet its match. In the weeks following my alliance with Claire and Simon, an eerie silence descended upon my ongoing battle with Eleanor. It was as if she had retreated, licking her wounds and biding her time before launching her next attack. Little did I know, the calm was merely the eye of the storm, and Eleanor was busy weaving a web of deceit that threatened to unravel everything I had worked so hard to build. The first inklings of her scheme came in the form of whispers and sideways glances from acquaintances I encountered around town. At first, I brushed them off as mere curiosity, but as the murmurs grew louder, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something sinister was afoot. It all came to a head one afternoon when I stopped by the local cafe for my usual coffee break. As I waited in line, I overheard a conversation between two women seated at a nearby table, their voices hushed but audible enough for me to catch snippets of their exchange. "Such a shame about Lila abandoning her mother-in-law like that. And after everything Eleanor has done for her, too. Selfish and ungrateful, if you ask me." My heart pounded in my chest as I pieced together the fragments, realizing with growing horror that Eleanor had been spreading lies about me, painting me as the villain in our twisted narrative. Anger and disbelief coursed through my veins, but before I could confront the gossiping women, a familiar voice cut through the din. "Don't believe everything you hear," Claire said, her expression stern as she approached the table. "My mother is a master manipulator, and she's twisting the truth to suit her agenda." The women fell silent, their faces flushed with embarrassment at being caught in their indiscretion. Without another word, Claire beckoned me to follow her, and we swiftly exited the cafe. "Eleanor is up to her old tricks again," she fumed as we stepped onto the sidewalk. "Trying to turn the community against you by spreading vicious rumors." My mind raced, struggling to comprehend the depths of Eleanor's deception. But why? What does she hope to gain by turning people against me? Claire's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing with resolve. Isolation, alienation. She wants to break you down until you have no choice but to succumb to her demands. A chill ran down my spine as the realization sank in. Eleanor was waging a psychological war, using the very community I had called home as her weapon. "We can't let her get away with this," I said, my voice tinged with determination. "We need to expose her lies and show everyone the truth." Claire nodded, a glint of resolve in her eyes. "And we will. Simon and I have been gathering evidence, testimonies from others who have fallen victim to Mother's manipulation over the years. It's time we fought fire with fire." As we parted ways, a sense of purpose burned within me, fueling my resolve to take the fight to Eleanor. She had underestimated my strength, my resilience, and now she would face the consequences of her actions. Returning home, I immediately set to work, compiling every shred of evidence I had, from the hurtful words she had hurled at me over the years to the countless instances of emotional abuse. I pored over the documentation, meticulously organizing it into a damning case against Eleanor's tyranny. With each piece of evidence I uncovered, my determination grew stronger, solidifying my conviction that Eleanor's reign of terror must end, no matter the cost. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, a newfound sense of clarity washed over me. The battle lines had been drawn, and it was time to strike back. Not just for myself, but for every life Eleanor had sought to control and diminish. The time for retribution was nigh, and I would be the one to deliver the final blow, shattering Eleanor's carefully constructed facade and exposing her true manipulative nature to the world. The days leading up to the community event were a flurry of preparation and strategizing. Claire, Simon, and I pored over every last detail, ensuring that our plan to expose Eleanor's manipulation was airtight. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Simon asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "Once we pull the trigger, there's no going back." I met his gaze, my resolve unwavering. "I'm sure. Eleanor has tormented us for far too long. It's time she faced the consequences of her actions." Claire placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "We've got your back, Lila. No matter what happens, we're in this together." Finally, the day of reckoning arrived, and the tension was palpable as we made our way to the community center. Eleanor was already there, holding court with her usual air of superiority, oblivious to the storm that was about to be unleashed. As the event commenced, I could feel the weight of anticipation pressing down on me, my heart pounding in my chest. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the chance to expose Eleanor's true nature and reclaim my dignity once and for all. When my turn at the podium came, I took a deep breath, steadying myself for the confrontation that was about to unfold. As I stepped up to the microphone, Eleanor's eyes narrowed, sensing that something was amiss. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice ringing out clear and strong. "I'm sure many of you have heard the rumors circulating about me and my supposed mistreatment of Eleanor Turner." A murmur rippled through the crowd, heads nodding in acknowledgement of the whispers that had been spreading like wildfire. "Well, I'm here to set the record straight," I continued, my gaze locking onto Eleanor's, daring her to challenge me. "The truth is, it's not me who has been the manipulator and the abuser. It's Eleanor herself." Eleanor's face contorted with rage, her eyes blazing with fury as she realized what was unfolding. "How dare you?" she spat, rising from her seat. "You ungrateful, lying." But I didn't let her finish, pressing on with my damning expose. For years, Eleanor has subjected me to emotional and psychological torment, belittling me and making me feel worthless. And I'm not the only one. With a nod to Claire and Simon, they stepped forward, each holding a stack of documents and testimonies from others who had fallen victim to Eleanor's cruelty. "These are the accounts of people whose lives Eleanor has sought to control and manipulate, All in the name of her twisted sense of family duty, I declared, my voice reverberating through the stunned silence. One by one, the testimonies were read aloud, painting a vivid picture of Eleanor's reign of terror, a tapestry of lies, manipulation, and emotional abuse woven with startling clarity. As the final account echoed through the hall, all eyes turned to Eleanor, her once imperious demeanor shattered, replaced by a mask of humiliation and defeat. "You see," I said, addressing the stunned crowd, "Eleanor has been the true villain all along, using her position of power to subjugate and control those around her. But no more. Today, her lies and deceit have been exposed for all to see." A smattering of applause broke out, growing louder as more and more people joined in, their eyes filled with a mixture of shock and newfound respect. Eleanor, meanwhile, sat frozen, her lips trembling with a combination of rage and disbelief. In a single, climactic moment, her carefully cultivated facade had crumbled, revealing the ugly truth that she had so desperately tried to conceal. As the applause died down, I turned to face her one last time, my voice steady and resolute. "Your reign of terror is over, Eleanor. You have no power over me or anyone else anymore." With those words, I stepped down from the podium, my head held high, basking in the sweet taste of victory. The shackles of Eleanor's manipulation had been broken, and I was finally free to embrace the future on my own terms, unburdened by the weight of her toxicity. As I made my way through the crowd, surrounded by a chorus of congratulations and newfound respect, I couldn't help but feel a sense of profound relief and vindication. The battle had been long and arduous, but in the end, justice had prevailed, and the truth had set me free. Eleanor's reign of terror was over, and a new chapter in my life was about to begin, one filled with the promise of healing, growth, and the sweet taste of hard-won independence. In the weeks following my public exposure of Eleanor's manipulation, a profound shift took place within me. It was as if a weight had been lifted, a burden I had carried for far too long finally cast aside. The community's reaction had been overwhelmingly supportive, with many expressing admiration for my courage in standing up to Eleanor's tyranny. Some even shared their own stories of her cruelty, reinforcing the realization that I had not been alone in my suffering. Eleanor, however, had retreated into a self-imposed exile, her once formidable presence reduced to a mere shadow of its former self. Whispers circulated that she had become a recluse, too ashamed to face the world after her lies and deceit had been laid bare. For a fleeting moment, I felt a twinge of pity for the woman who had once wielded such power over me. But that fleeting sentiment was quickly extinguished by the memory of her cruel words and actions, a stark reminder of the emotional toll she had inflicted upon me and countless others. As the dust settled, I found myself at a crossroads, uncertain of what path to take next. The shackles of Eleanor's control had been broken, but the scars of her abuse still lingered, leaving me questioning my own sense of self-worth and purpose. It was during this period of introspection that an unexpected ally emerged, Derek's brother Simon. He had been a steadfast supporter throughout my battle with Eleanor, and now he became a source of guidance and support as I navigated the uncharted waters of my newfound freedom. "You know, Lila," he said one afternoon as we shared a cup of coffee, "you've been through hell and back, but you came out on the other side stronger than ever." I offered a wry smile, my fingers tracing the rim of my mug. "Sometimes I'm not so sure. Eleanor's words, her constant belittling, it leaves scars, Simon." He nodded, his expression understanding. "I know. Believe me, I've been there. But you can't let her win, not anymore. You've taken back control of your life, and now it's up to you to decide what comes next." His words struck a chord within me, igniting a spark of determination that had been flickering in the aftermath of my confrontation with Eleanor. He was right. I had fought too hard and sacrificed too much to let her toxic legacy continue to haunt me. From that moment on, I made a conscious effort to reclaim my sense of self, to rediscover the woman I had been before Eleanor's manipulation had taken root. I poured myself into my work, finding solace in the creative outlets that had once brought me joy. Slowly but surely, the shadows of Eleanor's cruelty began to recede, replaced by a newfound sense of purpose and self-assurance. As the months passed, I found myself surrounded by a network of supportive friends and allies, each one a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Claire and Simon remained steadfast pillars of strength, their unwavering loyalty a constant reminder that I was no longer alone in my journey. And though Derek's absence still weighed heavily on my heart, I found solace in the knowledge that he would have been proud of the woman I had become, a woman who had stared down her demons and emerged victorious, her spirit unbroken and her determination unwavering. As I stood on the balcony of my apartment one warm summer evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I couldn't help but reflect on the long and arduous path that had led me to this moment. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in my life, I embraced that uncertainty with open arms, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, I possessed the strength and resilience to overcome them. Eleanor's reign of terror was a distant memory, a mere footnote in the story of my life, a story that was just beginning to unfold, filled with the promise of growth, healing, and the sweet taste of hard-won independence. As the night sky blanketed the city, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, a peace born of the knowledge that I had reclaimed my power, my dignity, and my sense of self. The battles of the past had been fought and won, and now the future stretched out before me, ripe with endless possibilities. With a deep breath, I turned and made my way back inside, ready to embrace the next chapter of my life, a chapter written on my own terms, free from the shackles of Eleanor's toxicity and filled with the promise of a brighter tomorrow. The rusted lock gave way with a sharp tug, the heavy iron door creaking open to reveal a dimly lit space within the decrepit shed. As my eyes adjusted, a faint whimper reached my ears, the unmistakable sound of a child's muffled cries. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Is someone there?" Silence. Steeling my nerves, I stepped inside, the musty air assaulting my senses. Rays of sunlight streamed through cracks in the walls, illuminating a small, huddled figure in the corner. I gasped, covering my mouth to stifle the cry that threatened to escape. It was a young girl, her frail body curled into a tight ball, stringy blonde hair obscuring her face. At the sound of my footsteps, she froze, her cries turning to ragged breaths. "It's okay. I won't hurt you," I said, my words gentle yet firm. "My name is Evelyn. I'm here to help." Slowly, she lifted her head, and our eyes met. Piercing blue orbs, haunted yet defiant, stared back at me, the gaze of one far older than her years. A surge of recognition washed over me, coupled with disbelief and horror. "Eliza?" I whispered, the name I never thought I'd utter again. "Eliza Carson?" Her brow furrowed, confusion flickering across her delicate features. Of course, she wouldn't recognize me. We'd never met. Eliza Carson was Clayton's cousin, presumed dead after a boating accident 6 years ago when she was only 6 years old. Her body was never recovered, but the entire community mourned her loss. "How do you know my name?" Her small voice quivered, laced with equal parts fear and desperation. "Eliza, it's me, Evelyn. I'm married to your cousin Clayton." I inched closer, my hands raised in a placating gesture. "You're safe now, I promise. I'll get you out of here." Her eyes widened, realization dawning. "You have to go," she pleaded, shrinking back. "If he finds out, you know—" The shed's entrance slammed open, the force sending a tremor through the floorboards. I whirled around to find Clayton, his expression a mix of shock and trepidation. "Evelyn?" His gaze flickered between us, confusion rapidly giving way to panic. "What are you doing here? Get away from her!" I stood my ground, shielding Eliza with my body. "Clayton, what is going on? Why is your cousin, who everyone thought was dead, locked up in this shed?" His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "You don't understand. It's not what it looks like." "Then explain it to me," I demanded, my voice rising. "Because right now it looks like your family has been lying and keeping a little girl prisoner for God knows how long." Eliza flinched at my outburst, and I softened my tone. "Please, Clayton, she's just a child. Whatever this is about, we need to get her out of here and to safety." Clayton's shoulders slumped, defeated. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words died on his lips as a booming voice echoed from outside. "What in the blazes is going on here?" My blood turned to ice as Terrence Carson, Clayton's uncle, and the family patriarch appeared in the doorway, his imposing figure casting a long shadow over us all. Terrence's eyes narrowed as they settled on Eliza's frail form cowering behind me. A cruel sneer twisted his weathered features. Well, seems the little brat has been discovered." He spat the words like venom. Didn't think you'd last this long, girl. I tensed, shielding Eliza further from his menacing glare. What is the meaning of this, Terrence? Why have you been keeping a child locked up like some animal? He scoffed, unfazed by my accusation. That's none of your concern, Missy. You've stuck your nose where it don't belong. Like hell it's not my concern, I shot back, fury rising within me. This is my family, too, and I have a right to know what kind of depravity you've been up to. Terrence advanced, his bulky frame towering over me. You watch your tone, girl. This is my land, my family. What I do here is my business. Clayton stepped between us, his arms extended. Uncle Terrence, please. There's no need for this. Let's just take a breath and... And what, boy? Terrence snarled, rounding on his nephew. You gonna take her side over your own blood, after everything I've done for this family? Clayton faltered, his eyes flitting between us, torn. Seizing the opportunity, I pressed on. Clayton, look at me. You know this is wrong. Whatever your uncle's reasons, keeping a child prisoner is unforgivable. We have to get Eliza out of here and to the authorities. Terrence barked a harsh laugh. The authorities? You think that sheriff buddy of yours will lift a finger against me? I own half this goddamn town, girl. No one's gonna believe the ramblings of some outsider over the word of a Carson. His words chilled me to the bone, but I refused to back down. We'll see about that. I'm not afraid of you, Terrence. Not anymore. With a surprising burst of strength, I grabbed Eliza's hand and pulled her towards the exit. Terrence made a move to stop us, but Clayton held him back, his expression pained but resolute. As we burst out into the open air, I heard Terrence's roar of fury echoing behind us. This ain't over, you hear me? You're gonna regret this, Evelyn Carson. I'll make sure of it. We ran, putting as much distance between us in that wretched place as possible. Eliza's small hand trembled in mine, but she didn't slow, her resilience evident despite her ordeal. Finally, we reached the safety of town, and I ushered her into the back of my truck, out of sight. Her wide, haunted eyes met mine, brimming with a mixture of fear and hope. What happens now? She whispered, her voice small, but laced with steel. I cupped her face gently, determination blazing within me. Now, we fight back. We're going to expose what Terrence has done, and make sure he can never hurt anyone again. A faint smile tugged at her cracked lips, and she nodded, the first spark of life I'd seen in her since our fateful encounter. As I gunned the engine, peeling out of the sleepy town that harbored such horrors, I knew there was no turning back. Terrence had made it personal, and I would stop at nothing to bring him to justice, both for Eliza's sake and my own. The game was afoot, and I would see this through to the bitter end, no matter what stood in my way. Terrence's reign of terror was about to come crashing down, and God help anyone who tried to stop me. My truck rumbled to a stop outside the sheriff's station, the engine still growling angrily as I killed the ignition. Eliza peered out the window, her small frame tense with apprehension. It's okay, I said, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. Marcus is a good man. He'll help us. She nodded mutely, chewing her lip as we exited the vehicle. The station's double doors swung open, and Marcus himself strode out, a concerned crease etched into his brow. Evelyn, what's going on? His gaze landed on Eliza, and his eyes widened. Is that... It's a long story, I replied grimly. We need to talk, in private. Understanding flashed across his features as he ushered us inside, his demeanor all business. Once sequestered in his office, I wasted no time recounting the harrowing events of the day, from discovering Eliza's confinement to Terrence's menacing threats. Marcus listened intently, his expression darkening with every detail. When I finished, he let out a low whistle, scrubbing a hand over his weathered face. Son of a bitch, he muttered. I knew Terrence Carson was a piece of work, but this... He shook his head, disgust etched into his features. You believe me, then? I pressed. You'll help us bring him down? Of course I believe you, Evelyn. He reached across his desk, clasping my hand firmly. You know I've always had your back. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure that bastard gets what's coming to him. Relief washed over me at his words, but it was short-lived as another thought occurred to me. What about Eliza's safety? Terrence won't stop until he gets her back under his control. Marcus's jaw tightened. Leave that to me. I'll set you both up somewhere secure, out of town where he can't get to you. No. The vehement protest came not from me, but from Eliza herself. We both turned to her, startled by the sudden outburst from the normally timid girl. "I'm not running anymore," she declared, her eyes blazing with a fire I hadn't yet seen. "That monster has kept me locked up, afraid of my own shadow for too long. I want to face him, to make him pay for what he's done." My admiration for her bravery was tempered by concern. "Eliza, I understand how you feel, but nothing," she cut me off fiercely. "I may be just a kid, but I'm stronger than he thinks. You said we were going to fight back, and that's what I want to do." I opened my mouth to protest further, but Marcus held up a hand, silencing me. "She's right, Evelyn." His expression was grim but resolute. "If we want to take Terrence down for good, we'll need Eliza's testimony. She's the key to exposing his crimes and making sure he can't wriggle his way out of this." Eliza lifted her chin defiantly, her jaw set in determination far beyond her years. In that moment, I saw not a frightened child, but a young woman forged in the fires of unimaginable hardship, a kindred spirit with an inner strength to match my own. With a slow nod of acceptance, I turned back to Marcus. "All right, what's our next move?" A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "First, we need to gather more evidence against Terrence, something concrete to back up Eliza's story. And for that," he paused, his gaze flickering towards the door, "we'll need to bring in some extra firepower." As if on cue, there was a sharp rap at the office door. Marcus's smile widened as he called out, "Come on in, Nina. We've got work to do." Nina Carson swept into the room like a whirlwind, her sharp features pinched with an expression somewhere between apprehension and distaste. Her piercing gaze settled on me, then Eliza, before flicking back to Marcus. "You weren't kidding," she muttered. "The kid's alive." I bristled at her dismissive tone, but Marcus held up a placating hand. "Nina, you know why I called you here. We need your help taking down your father once and for all." A flicker of emotion passed over her face, a mixture of anger and hurt so fleeting I almost missed it. With a curt nod, she seemed to steel herself, smoothing her features into an impassive mask. "Fine. What do you need from me?" As Marcus laid out the situation, Nina listened stonily, her jaw clenched tight. When he finished, she let out a harsh bark of laughter, shaking her head in disbelief. "Typical Dad," she spat. "Lying, manipulating, doing whatever it takes to maintain his twisted idea of control." Her gaze landed on Eliza, softening ever so slightly. "I'm sorry, kid. You didn't deserve to get caught up in his sick games." Eliza met her stare evenly, her small frame radiating a strength that belied her years. "It's not your fault," she replied, her voice steady. "You're not the one who kept me locked up like an animal for 6 years." An uncomfortable silence hung in the air, thick with unspoken tensions and histories I could only guess at. Finally, Nina broke it with a weary sigh. "You're right. This is on him, not me. Not anymore." Her jaw set in grim determination. "I'll help however I can to take the bastard down. No more lies, no more protecting him. It's time he paid for his crimes." "That's what I like to hear." Marcus clapped his hands together, all business once more. "First things first, we need to gather evidence, anything that can corroborate Eliza's story and prove Terrence was behind her disappearance." "I might be able to help with that," Nina offered, her voice taking on a harder edge. "Dad may be good at covering his tracks, but he's also arrogant as hell. Chances are he's left a trail, however faint, if we know where to look." A thin smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. "Then it's a good thing we've got an insider on our side." Nina's lips curved into a matching expression, tinged with a bitterness that spoke volumes. "Believe me, I know all about the Carson family's dirty little secrets. Let's just say dear old Dad wasn't exactly Father of the Year material." As she delved into the sordid details, my anger towards Terrence Carson only intensified, both for Eliza's horrific mistreatment and the web of manipulation he'd spun around his own flesh and blood. This man's villainy knew no bounds, tainting everything and everyone he touched like a malignant blight. But not for much longer. With Marcus's tenacity, Eliza's bravery, and Nina's inside knowledge, we would unravel Terrence's schemes thread by thread until he had nowhere left to hide. Come hell or high water, he would face justice, both for his sake and mine. When Nina finished her grim recounting, I turned to Marcus, my expression hardening with resolve. "Where do we start?" The sheriff leaned back in his chair, a feral glint in his eye. "At the beginning, we're going to dig into every inch of Terrence's life, Turn over every rock until we find the proof to bury that son of a bitch for good." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in before continuing grimly. "Whatever it takes." The Carson family estate loomed ahead, its wrought iron gates an imposing barrier guarding the secrets that lurked within. Nina gripped the steering wheel tightly as we approached, her knuckles white with tension. "You sure about this, Evelyn?" she asked, her voice tight. "There's no going back after we cross that line." I eyed the foreboding manor, feeling its dark presence like a weight pressing down on me. "I'm sure. It's time we got some answers, straight from the devil's mouth." Nina gave a grim nod before punching in the code, the gates grinding open with a piercing shriek of metal on metal. We pulled through, the tires crunching over the gravel drive as we neared the main house. Lorraine Carson was waiting on the porch, her arms crossed defensively over her chest. As we climbed out of the car, her pinched expression softened briefly at the sight of her daughter. "Nina, what are you doing here?" Her gaze landed on me, eyes narrowing to slits. "And you brought her? After everything that's happened?" "That's exactly why we're here, Mother," Nina replied coolly. "We know what Dad's been up to, about Eliza. It's over." Lorraine flinched as if struck, panic flitting across her features before being hastily masked by a stony facade. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Can it, Mom?" Nina snapped, her patience clearly waning. "The lying, the cover-ups, it all stops now. We're going to take that sick bastard down, and you're either with us or against us." A tense silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken history and roiling emotions. Finally, Lorraine's shoulders sagged in defeat. "You always did have a way of cutting through the bullshit, Nina." She sighed, suddenly looking every one of her 53 years. "I suppose I can't keep denying it any longer." Gesturing for us to follow, she led the way inside, her measured steps echoing hollowly through the cavernous foyer. My gaze swept over the opulent trappings, gilded mirrors, priceless antiques, and not a single personal touch to be seen. Like a museum frozen in time, devoid of warmth or life. How fitting for the Carson family. Lorraine ushered us into a dimly lit study, the heavy drapes drawn against the dying sun outside. A glass of amber liquid sat untouched on the mahogany desk, a telltale sign of its occupant's recent presence. At our entrance, Terence rose from the worn leather armchair, his expression thunderous. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" he growled, his eyes flicking between Nina and me with undisguised contempt. "I don't recall inviting you piranhas into my home." "Can it, Terence?" Lorraine said, her voice low but laced with a surprising venom. "We're done with your lies, your deceptions. It's time we settled this, once and for all." For a fraction of a second, a flicker of unease passed over Terence's craggy features. There and gone so quickly, I wondered if I'd imagined it. Just as swiftly, the mask of arrogance slammed back into place, his lips curling into a contemptuous sneer. "So the family betrayers have come to rally against me, have they?" He shook his head with a mocking chuckle. "You're welcome to try, but you'll find I'm not so easily cowed." "We'll see about that," I bit out, barely containing my fury. "We know what you did to Eliza, you twisted son of a bitch. Keeping a child locked up like an animal for your own sick gratification? That's a new low, even for you." His gaze locked with mine, cold and unflinching. "You have no idea what you're talking about, girl. Everything I've done, everything, has been for the preservation and protection of this family's legacy." Terence's words hung in the air like a noxious cloud, his twisted justification chilling me to the core. Before I could formulate a response, Nina stepped forward, her eyes blazing with barely contained rage. "That's enough of your rationalizations, you sick fuck," she spat. "We're done playing by your rules. Eliza is safe, the jig is up, and you're going to pay for what you've done." A muscle twitched in Terence's jaw, the first crack in his impassive facade. "You ungrateful little bitch," he snarled, his voice low and menacing. "After everything I've sacrificed for this family, this is how you repay me?" "Sacrificed?" Nina let out a harsh bark of laughter. "Is that what you call systematically destroying us from the inside out? Alienating Mom? Driving me away with your toxic vitriol? Wake up, you delusional bastard. The only thing you've ever cared about is maintaining your twisted power trip." I could see the fury building in Terence like a raging inferno, his body practically vibrating with the effort of restraining it. When he spoke again, his tone was soft, almost gentle. Nina, you have no idea the things I've had to do to preserve our legacy, the sacrifices, the difficult choices. His gaze bored into her, sharp as flint. You think I wanted to do what I did to Eliza, that I took pleasure in it? The air left my lungs in a shocked rush. Terrence's admission hung there, visceral and horrifying. Nina looked equally sickened, her skin taking on an ashen pallor. You monster, she choked out. How could you? How could I? Terrence roared, the floodgates finally bursting open. That sniveling brat was a liability, a blight on our family's good name. She had to be dealt with, made to disappear for the greater good. My hands curled into white-knuckled fists at my sides as a wave of revulsion crashed over me. This man's depravity knew no bounds, not even when it came to his own flesh and blood. So you admit it, I bit out through gritted teeth. You're the one who made Eliza disappear, then kept her locked up like a prisoner all these years. A cruel smile twisted Terrence's lips. Give the girl a prize. Yes, I orchestrated the whole thing. The boating accident, the fake investigation, all of it. And you want to know the real kicker? He leaned forward, his eyes glittering with perverse glee. Her own sniveling parents were in on it from the start. A startled gasp from Lorraine was the only sound in the deafening silence that followed. Nina looked utterly shell-shocked, her mouth working soundlessly as she struggled to process her father's horrific revelation. It was Marcus who finally broke the stillness, his voice hard as tempered steel. That's more than enough confession. With a deft movement, he had his sidearm leveled squarely at Terrence's chest, his expression utterly devoid of mercy. Terrence Carson, you're under arrest for the kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and endangerment of a minor. You have the right to remain silent. As Marcus recited the Miranda rights, cuffing the now ranting Terrence with practiced efficiency, I caught Nina's eye across the room. The anguish and betrayal etched on her features said it all, the last thread of family loyalty severed for good. No matter what came next, there would be no coming back from this day. Terrence's web of lies and manipulation had finally been laid bare, the depth of his evil exposed for all to see. My path was clear now, forged in the fires of this hard-won truth. By whatever means necessary, I would ensure Terrence faced the full weight of justice for his unspeakable crimes. If it was the last thing I did, he would pay. The courthouse was a madhouse, swarming with reporters and gawkers, desperate for a glimpse of the sordid drama about to unfold. I pushed my way through the throngs, Eliza's small hand clutched tightly in mine as we forged a path towards the imposing oak doors. Just keep your head down, I murmured, shielding her from the flashing cameras and shouted questions. It'll be over soon. She gave a tiny nod, her jaw set in a determined line far beyond her years. Despite her diminutive stature, she carried herself with a quiet strength that never failed to fill me with awe and a fierce protectiveness. No matter what, I would ensure Terrence Carson paid for what he'd done to this remarkable girl. The courtroom itself was mercifully hushed, the air thick with tension as we filed in alongside the prosecution. My gaze immediately found Terrence, seated ramrod straight at the defendant's table, his expression one of haughty disdain. Our eyes locked for a brief moment, a silent challenge passing between us. A cruel smirk curved his thin lips, sending an icy shiver down my spine. That twisted son of a bitch was up to something. I could feel it in my bones. As the proceedings got underway, I found my attention divided between the testimonies and Terrence's every-minute shift and reaction. He remained infuriatingly inscrutable, betraying none of the turmoil that must have been roiling beneath that impeccably composed facade. It wasn't until Eliza was called to the stand that the first hairline fractures began to show. She was so small up there, positively dwarfed by the imposing witness box. But when she lifted her head and fixed Terrence with those haunted blue eyes, there was an unshakable resolve blazing within them that defied her fragile stature. "Tell us, Miss Carson," the prosecutor prompted gently. "In your own words, what happened the night you disappeared 6 years ago?" A hushed stillness descended over the courtroom as Eliza drew a fortifying breath. When she spoke, her voice rang out clear and unwavering. "It was my uncle, Terrence. He took me from my parents' house late one night, told me we were going on a secret adventure." She recounted the harrowing tale in disturbing detail, the staged boating accident, the wrath hole in which she'd been imprisoned all these years, the mind games and emotional torment at Terrence's hands. With every new revelation, I could see the cracks in Terrence's composure deepening, his knuckles whitening around the arms of his chair. And he said I had to stay hidden, that no one could know I was alive, not even my own parents. Eliza's voice began to waver, but she pressed on with heart-rending bravery. He said it was for the good of the family. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even the most hardened observers seemed shaken by the graphic injustice laid bare before them, all except Terrence. As Eliza was finally excused, his booming voice rang out, shattering the somber silence like a thunderclap. "You little lying bitch!" Before anyone could react, he'd surged to his feet, teeth bared in an animalistic snarl as he lunged towards the witness stand, and Eliza. A collective gasp went up from the gallery, but I was already in motion, hurling myself bodily between the raging monster and his target. His hands found my throat, cutting off my airway with bruising force as we crashed backwards. Black spots danced across my vision, but I clawed desperately at his vice-like grip, a primal surge of adrenaline propelling me. Not this time, you bastard. Not her. Not my family. Distantly, I was aware of pandemonium erupting around us, shouting, scuffling, the distant wail of sirens. But all that existed in that moment was the furious pounding of my heart, the burning need for air, and Terrence's pitiless face looming over me, twisted in a sadistic leer of triumph. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the pressure was gone. I sucked in a ragged gasp, blinking against the dark blot still obscuring my sight. When my vision finally cleared, I saw Terrence being swarmed by a sea of bodies, dragging his thrashing form away as he spewed vile curses and threats. Marcus was there, features set in a mask of cold fury as he slapped the cuffs back on the raving man's wrists. And in the eye of the storm's aftermath stood Eliza, gazing at me with those wise, haunted eyes, the eyes of one who had witnessed the true depths of human cruelty, yet emerged from the abyss unbowed. As our eyes met, a silent understanding passed between us. No matter what it took, we had won this day. Terrence Carson's reign of terror was over. The rain fell in a soft drizzle, misting the air with a gentle haze as I made my way down the familiar dirt path. Overhead, the iron-gray clouds parted enough to allow a few feeble rays of sunlight to pierce through, bathing the Carson family cemetery in a somber glow. I'd been here too many times over the past year, first for Clayton's mother Lorraine's funeral after her untimely passing, then for the hearings and sentencing that finally saw Terrence put behind bars for the rest of his natural life. Each visit had been more somber than the last, the weight of this place's history like a shroud draped over my shoulders. But not today. Today, I carried a renewed sense of purpose, a lift in my step that had been sorely missing for far too long. As I neared the secluded corner where the newest edition lay, a small figure came into view, sitting cross-legged before the simple granite headstone. "There you are," I called out softly, unable to keep the faint smile from tugging at my lips. "I was wondering where you'd gotten off to." Eliza turned, her face breaking into a warm smile that still managed to take my breath away after all this time. In the 2 years since her harrowing rescue and Terrence's downfall, she'd blossomed from a haunted waif into a vibrant, healthy young woman. Her eyes shining with a light I'd once feared was extinguished forever. "Sorry, I just needed a moment," she replied, her gaze drifting back to the gravestone with a wistful expression. "It still doesn't feel real sometimes, you know? After everything." I settled onto the damp grass beside her, draping an arm around her shoulders. She immediately leaned into my embrace with a contented sigh. "I know it's been an incredible adjustment after what that monster put you through," I murmured, pressing a gentle kiss to the crown of her head. "But you've handled it with more strength and grace than anyone could have hoped for, sweetheart. You're an inspiration to us all." A faint blush colored her cheeks at the praise, but her lips curved upwards in that radiant smile once more. "I had a good role model," she said simply, reaching out to grasp my free hand in her slender fingers. "If it wasn't for you, Evelyn, I might have never." Her voice trailed off, but I could hear the unspoken meaning loud and clear. I gave her hand a reassuring squeeze, a silent promise that those nightmarish days were firmly in the past, now. "Well, you'll never have to worry about that again," I assured her fiercely. Terrence is gone for good, and the rest of us, we're going to be just fine. We lapsed into a comfortable silence, turning our attention back to the gravestone and the words etched into its timeless surface. In memory of Eliza Carson, beloved daughter, cousin, and friend, may you forever rest in peace. So much pain, so much heartache had stemmed from those 5 simple words, a tragic lie perpetrated by a deeply disturbed man blinded by his own greed and depravity. But in the end, it was a truth that had set Eliza free from her suffering, giving her a new lease on the life that had nearly been stolen away. A gentle breeze rustled the trees overhead, carrying the first hints of spring, of new beginnings and fresh starts. I watched contentedly as the wind tousled Eliza's golden tresses, her face tilted towards the pale sunlight filtering through the clouds like a flower unfurling its petals. There was still healing to be done, scars that may never fully fade. But in that moment, bathed in nature's delicate renewal, I felt a profound sense of peace and hope, our future. The nightmare was finally over. It was time to awaken to the world anew. As Eliza and I rose, hand in hand, to make our way back home, I silently vowed that from this day forward, we would embrace each moment with open hearts and minds. No longer shackled by the shadows of Terrence's malice, we would bask in the warm glow of hard-won justice and dare to dream of what lay ahead. A new dawn was on the horizon, burning bright and radiant with possibilities, and we would greet it together, unafraid. The piercing scream ripped through my chest before I could stop it. There they were, tangled together like poisonous vines, my husband and my stepmother, locked in a sordid embrace on the kitchen counter. My eyes stung with unshed tears as Alex scrambled off Lana, his limp excuse for a shirt hanging open. Bryn, this isn't... He couldn't even finish his thought. Lana simply smirked, not an ounce of shame etched on her face as she smoothed her rumpled silk robe. Hello, dear. Didn't expect you home so soon, did you? Her saccharine tone sliced through me like shards of glass. You vile snake! I hurled the words at her, chest heaving. How could you, both of you? Alex opened his mouth again, but I cut him off with a hand slicing through the air. Save it. I don't want to hear another word from you. Pivoting on my heel, I stormed out of that wretched kitchen, slamming the front door behind me with enough force to rattle the windows. Hot tears streamed down my cheeks as I climbed into my car and peeled out of the driveway, desperate to put distance between me and that nightmare. I must have driven aimlessly for hours, the weight of their betrayal crushing my very soul. Lana, the woman who had stepped into my life as a stepmother when I was just 16, carrying on an affair with my own husband behind my back. And Alex, the one person I'd thought I could trust without question. How could I have been so blind? When I finally returned home well past midnight, the house was blissfully empty. I made a beeline for the den, scooping up the mail and papers scattered across the desk. That's when a plain white envelope caught my eye, addressed to me in my father's familiar scrawl. With trembling hands, I tore it open. Several pages fell out, covered in Dad's tight penmanship. My eyes immediately landed on the top line. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. Dad's words jumped off the page, each line a punch to the gut. I'm sorry I couldn't share this with you in person, but I've long had my suspicions about Lana. That woman is rotten to the core, manipulative and hell-bent on sinking her claws into our family's wealth by any means necessary. I sucked in a sharp breath, the pieces slowly falling into place. Dad had tried to warn me, but I'd been too blind to see Lana's true nature. Too consumed by the relief of having a mother figure after Mom's passing to look past the sugary facade. A noise from the hallway made me stiffen. Through the open doorway, I saw Lana saunter by in her silk robe, not a care in the world, like she hadn't just decimated my life mere hours ago. You lying snake! The biting words burst from my lips before I could stop them. Lana whirled around, eyes widening in mock innocence. Why, Bryn, whatever is the matter? Don't play dumb with me. I shook the letter at her. Dad knew all about your twisted games. He tried to stop you from worming your way into this family's life. A flicker of anger flashed across her face before the syrupy mask slid back into place. Your father was a paranoid old fool obsessed with fending off delusions. I pitied him, really. White-hot rage lanced through me, and I moved towards her, fists clenched, ready to unleash years of pent-up fury. But she only laughed, taking a step back with a shake of her head. "I'd think twice about that if I were you, dear. Your father's ramblings won't hold up in court against the truth." With that parting shot, she turned and slinked away, leaving me seething in her wake. Gripping the letter, I stalked into the living room and grabbed my cell phone, scrolling to find the number Dad had left. Mara Lewis, his attorney. The phone rang twice before a crisp voice answered. "Mara Lewis, Miss Lewis, it's Bryn Ellis. I need to meet with you as soon as possible regarding my father's estate." There was a pause. "Of course, I've been expecting your call. Shall we say 3 p.m. this afternoon at my office?" "I'll be there," I replied through gritted teeth. If Lana thought she could slither her way out of this, she was sorely mistaken. Dad had left me the key to exposing her twisted lies, and I wasn't about to let his final wishes go unanswered. She was going to pay for destroying my family, no matter what it took. By the time I ended the call, my path forward was clear. If Lana wanted truth and consequences, I would make damn sure that's exactly what she got. I stalked into Mara's office precisely at 3 p.m., my heels striking the marble floor with purpose. The impeccably dressed attorney rose from behind her desk, expression impassive. "Miss Ellis, thank you for coming in on such short notice." She waved a hand towards the plush leather chairs facing her desk. "Please have a seat." I sank into one of the chairs, back ramrod straight as I met her cool gaze. "I want to know everything. What evidence my father had against Lana, and what legal avenues are available to me." Mara's lips pressed into a thin line. "Very well." She reached into her desk drawer and retrieved a thick manila envelope. "These are the files your father left pertaining to his concerns over your stepmother." My fingers trembled slightly as I accepted the weighty bundle. Flipping it open, I scanned the pages. Reams of financial statements, phone records, even photos capturing Lana in compromising situations. As you can see, your father was quite thorough in documenting his findings. Mara allowed the faintest hint of admiration to color her tone. "However, much of this intelligence alone will be difficult to prosecute without corroborating evidence from other parties." I looked up sharply. "Are you saying Lana could still worm her way out of this?" "Potentially." Mara laced her fingers together atop the desk. "Which is why we must pursue a multi-pronged strategy. Legal proceedings, but also more personal venues of exposing the truth." A tiny smirk played across my lips as understanding dawned. "You mean going public and destroying her reputation beyond repair?" The barest hint of a nod. "Precisely. Draw her deceit into the light so utterly that no courtroom theatrics can obscure it." My gaze hardened to steel. "Do it. I want the whole book thrown at that conniving witch, financially, socially, all of it. I'll get you whatever information you need to leave her life in ashes." Mara's expression didn't flicker, but I could have sworn I saw a glint of approval in those steely eyes. "Very good, Miss Ellis. Then let's begin making preparations, shall we?" As I exited the office, I was acutely aware of the warpath stretching before me. Lana had waged her deception in the shadows, but by the time I was done, her wicked truth would be on display for the whole world to revile. The game was on. When I arrived home, Lana was lounging on the patio in that damned silk robe, sipping a glass of Chardonnay. She cast me a poisonous smile over the rim. "Why the grim look of determination, dear? Nothing unpleasant from the attorney I trust?" Digging my nails into my palms, I forced myself not to rise to the bait. "You'll see soon enough." With that, I brushed past her, heading inside to set my plans into motion. If the Viper thought she'd already won, she was sorely mistaken. I was just getting started. My first call was to Sam Jenkins, the one person I trusted wholeheartedly, my best friend since junior high. When she answered, I wasted no time launching into the sordid tale. "Oh my God, Bryn!" Even over the phone, her shock was palpable. "I can't believe Alex did that to you. And with your stepmother? Those depraved scum." I laughed darkly. "Oh, just wait until you hear the rest. This goes so much deeper." By the time I finished recounting Dad's letter and Lana's damning past, Sam was fuming. "That evil, manipulative witch. We have to take her down, Bryn. She can't be allowed to get away with what she's done to your family." Exactly. I exhaled slowly, appreciating the sense of ally I now had at my side. "That's why I need your help. We're going to expose Lana for the venomous snake she is, then make sure she can never slither back into a position to hurt anyone else." There was steely determination in Sam's tone. "Just say the word, B. I'm in all the way, whatever it takes." As I disconnected the call, lightning crackled outside, a tempest brewing to match the storm I was about to unleash. The sun was setting on Lana Winter's web of lies. The next few weeks were a dizzying blur of covert meetings, strategizing with Sam and Mara to meticulously construct our multi-pronged attack. Lana didn't suspect a thing as she swanned around the house, periodically shooting me smug looks that made my blood boil. If only she knew what was coming. The first phase began with an anonymous online expose that Sam had expertly crafted, laying out the lurid details of Lana's tawdry affair with my husband in cold, hard facts. The story spread like wildfire, scandalous screenshots circulating rapidly across social media. I'll never forget the look of shock on Lana's face when she finally saw the viral firestorm erupting around her. "What is this?" She gestured wildly at her laptop, face flushed with rage. "Some kind of sick prank?" I strolled over, feigning nonchalance as I scanned the screen. "Oh my, someone certainly did dig up some unsavory details about your personal life." I clicked my tongue in mock sympathy. "Not a good look, Lana. So much for keeping up that sugary facade. She rounded on me, eyes blazing like hellfire. "You did this?" I shrugged one shoulder lazily. "Can't control the internet, can you?" Allowing a small, satisfied smile to curve my lips, I turned and headed for the door. "But hey, look on the bright side. At least now everyone knows the real you." Her screams and curses followed me down the hallway, bringing a wicked gratification. That was just the opening salvo. The next phase unfolded in a rapid succession of haymakers. Carefully tailored leaks to the right sources, exposing Lana's shady business dealings and financial improprieties. Records of offshore bank accounts, incriminating call recordings, whistleblowers emerging from the shadows of her past, painting a damning portrait of greed and exploitation. Wave after wave of evidence battered her so-called good name, and with each fresh public humiliation, I could see the strain spreading across Alex's features. Poor sap, he'd believed Lana's con job too, letting himself get tangled up in her lies. Well, live by deception, die by deception, as they say. As the hammer continued to drop, the elite country club where Lana had hobnobbed with high society revoked her membership, effective immediately. Friendships fractured within days, former allies distancing themselves from the maelstrom of scandal now swirling around her. I savored every ignominious moment from a carefully calculated distance, emerging again only when the final crushing blow was prepared to strike. It was the night of the charity gala held annually by Lana's once-respected charitable foundation, an evening where she'd always taken great pains to present her saintly public visage. Well, that mask would shatter into a million pieces tonight. Sam and I positioned ourselves across the street from the grand ballroom entrance, dressed to the nines and clutching crystal flutes of champagne. At precisely 8 p.m., a towering billboard blazed to life on the adjacent building, emblazoned with a single phrase in garish red font: "Lane Winters, a legacy of lies, the full uncovered story." Beneath it, a QR code linked to a viral data dump, all of Dad's compiled evidence, the financial records and whistleblower testimonies presented in one thorough, utterly damning package for the world to consume. Within minutes, camera flashes were popping in a frenzied strobe across the red carpet as guests arrived. Those who saw the blistering billboard gaped in shock, muttering in phones held aloft, spreading the QR code like a contagion. Finally, Lana appeared in the center of the spectacle, eyes bulging in outrage and disbelief, as the realization of her annihilated reputation sank in. For one shining moment, her masquerade crumbled completely, exposing the true, blackened soul beneath. Another slow smile crept across my lips as I sipped my champagne and watched the Empress suffer a very public, very deserved execution. The first phase of my vengeance was complete. Time to turn my attention to the legal battlefield that awaited, and leave Lana to drown in the ocean of her own deceptions. The days following the charity gala exposé were a blissful reprieve as Lana went into full damage control mode. The house was mercifully quiet. She and Alex holed up separately with their lawyers, no doubt scrambling for some Hail Mary to counter the mountain of evidence we detonated. Good luck with that. Predictably, The first incoming volley was Lana summoning me to the den with a curt, "We need to talk." I strolled in to find her perched like a coiled viper on the chaise, eyes glinting with a mixture of wounded fury and smug calculation. Clearly she fancied herself holding some trump card. "Well, I see you've had your fun with your little internet theatrics." Her lips twisted in a mocking sneer. "But now the real game begins, pet. Unless you want to spend the rest of your days drowning in litigation, you'll back down immediately." I raised an eyebrow coolly. "Is that so? And what leverage could you possibly have, Lana?" Quick as a cobra's strike, she seized a folder from the side table and flung it at me. "See for yourself, dear." I crouched to scoop up the scattered contents, bank statements, property records, all laying out mine and Alex's joint assets in exacting detail. "What is this?" "Your Achilles' heel." A lupine smile curved her lips as the trap sprung shut. "Everything you've attempted so far is circumstantial at best, but with one simple lawsuit, your darling husband and I can ensure you're left with nothing but the clothes on your back." A cold shudder of realization trickled down my spine as her ploy crystallized. "Of course. Attack my financial foundation in tandem with the smear campaign. Bleed me dry through the legal system while simultaneously stripping me of credibility." Cunning little viper, I had to hand it to her. But if she thought unveiled threats would make me balk, she had sorely underestimated me. Straightening, I met her wolfish stare with an arctic one of my own. "You can posture and grandstand all you want, Lana. It won't make a damn bit of difference." I allowed a grim smile to tug the corner of my mouth. "I have the receipts, as they say. The money trails, the testimony, all of it. You're going down in flames one way or another." Her serpentine eyes narrowed dangerously. "We'll see about that, won't we?" With that parting shot still ringing in the air between us, I turned and marched from the room, the first tremors of the legal earthquake we were about to endure shuddering beneath my feet. Mara was waiting in her office a short while later when I swept through the door and took a seat across from her desk. "Let's go on the offensive," were the first words out of my mouth. A flicker of understanding passed behind her eyes as she rifled through a stack of documents. "Of course, we anticipated this maneuver when formulating strategy." She pushed a dossier across the desk towards me. "Here are the grounds we'll pursue. Alienation of affection to form the basis of your divorce proceedings against Mr. Hammond. Given the clear evidence of infidelity and marital misconduct on his part, we have more than sufficient legal footing." My finger traced the printed words, relief loosening the knot that had formed in my chest. Divorce the cheating bastard, of course. Step 1. And for the vindictive viper? I scooped up the next section of the file detailing counts of fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion. Mara allowed the ghost of a grim smile. "I took the liberty of reaching out to a few interested parties regarding your stepmother's activities." She slid a document across the desk. "The IRS, SEC, you name it. By the time we're through, Lana Winter's tangled financial web will be laid bare, along with the full extent of her years-long con." "Brilliant," I breathed, already envisioning her highfalutin lifestyle crumbling away to nothing but 4 drab prison walls. We moved swiftly and decisively, on all fronts. Mara's voice carried a lethal edge, a lioness scenting blood. "Lana fancies herself a master manipulator, exploiting the system to her benefit. Well, now she'll learn the true power of that very system when wielded against her." A feral smile curved my lips as the first papers were drawn up, the battle fully joined. "Game on, Lana. Don't bother hiring extra security. There's nowhere left for you to hide." The rules of engagement were set, and I wouldn't rest until I'd claimed victory through sheer overwhelming force. By the time this was over, that woman's life would be in ashes at my feet. The next several months were a dizzying cyclone of legal filings, deposition hearings, and mounting media frenzies as the twin proceedings against Lana and Alex accelerated. Mara was an indomitable force, calmly dismantling every underhanded tactic and angle of attack their lawyers attempted. I lost count of how many times I was grilled under oath, forced to recount in granular detail the undoing of my marriage. Each new dissolution hearing was akin to lancing a fresh wound, raw anger and humiliation burning in my throat. But I kept my composure, didn't dare let Lana or that sniveling weasel Alex see me flinch, no matter how many times Alex's lawyer tried to impugn my character or cast aspersions about my motives. Let them sling mud, I thought coldly. Won't change the truth staring them in the face. Speaking of which, Lana's legal battle was rapidly devolving into a masterclass of denial and misdirection. Her lawyers deployed every trick in the book to cast doubt on the mountain of incriminating evidence we'd amassed. Forged documents, they claimed, falsified testimony from paid actors, a coordinated campaign of lies by a bitter ex-wife desperately clinging to her material lifestyle. I had to smother laughter as I watched their clown show unfold in utter seriousness before the bench. Did Lana really think those third-rate theatrics would hold up against the towering edifice of proof we'd constructed? Mara shredded each absurd claim to bits with almost bored efficiency. Forensic records, rock-solid witness accounts, every damning data point laid out with the ruthless precision of a scalpel. And through it all, I took petty satisfaction in watching Lana's glaring weakness on the stand, as her artfully composed facade increasingly dissolved into flop sweat and desperate stammering. For once, the master manipulator had no script to fall back on, no lies to distort the corrosive truth burning her alive in that courtroom. The weeks ticked by with remorseless efficiency as the dual cases built to an inexorable climax. Lana's blustering faltered, her hired guns of lawyers slowly resigning themselves to the futility of their straits. At last, the day of reckoning dawned, a final trial date to decide both my divorce and the civil case against my shattered stepmother. I dressed simply but sharply, fixing my hair into a tight chignon as I steeled myself for the fight still to come. Alex and Lana were already seated at the defendant's table when I strode into the courtroom, heads bent in whispered conference with their haggard legal teams. They turned as one in my direction, twin expressions of loathing and fear. For the first time, I allowed myself a thin, predatory smile. They should be afraid of the all-consuming justice I was about to unleash. The proceedings passed in a whirlwind of procedural formalities, evidence rehashed, and accounts culminating to their inevitable apex. When the jury finally returned with their verdict, a deafening hush fell over the gallery. On the charge of felony embezzlement, how do you find? The forewoman stood, shoulders squared. We, the jury, find the defendant Lana Winters guilty. An electric shock seemed to judder through the courtroom. I could have sworn I heard the sharp crack of Lana's composure shattering in that instant as the words detonated in her ears. Tears began leaking from her eyes as the judge continued the stony pronouncement. Furthermore, the court finds sufficient grounds for civil tort based on alienation of affection in the matter of Bryn Ellis versus Alex Hammond. Divorce proceedings will commence immediately. A keening wail tore from Lana's throat as the full weight of loss crashed down upon her. Reputation, riches, the gilded facade of her life, all of it sledgehammered into rubble. And there, in the burning pyre of her ruination, the chains of bitterness that had shackled my soul for so long finally fell away in sublime release. Over. It was finally, utterly over. I took one last look at the shuddering, broken thing crumpled in the defendant's chair. The beast that had nearly destroyed me now caged at last. Not a shred of pity, mercy, or remorse remained between us. Only the karmic scales bearing down with implacable purgative force. As the bailiffs moved to take them away, Lana looked up at me with reddened, hateful eyes. But the iron curtain of my stare didn't waver until her disgrace finally dissolved behind the towering barricades of institutional gray. In the end, courage and truth had prevailed over calculation and venom. And although the road here had been brutal, my peace was finally restored. The rest would pass like a fever dream blasted away on the cleansing wind of justice served. I was free, reborn from the ashes of betrayal into someone tempered, someone stronger than I'd ever imagined. As I exited the courthouse and strode into the brilliant daylight, the specter of the past crumbling like ashes away, I inhaled the crisp air of my new life, untethered, inviolable, and fueled by deepest resilience. My vengeance was complete, but my true victory had only just begun. In the days and weeks following the court verdicts, an eerie silence descended upon my life. The seething crusade that had fueled my every waking breath abruptly faded, leaving a void I didn't quite know how to fill. Gone were the whispered strategizing sessions with Mara, the burning need to scour legal documents for any advantage over Lana's wicked machinations. Even taking Sam's calls, those pillars of support and levity as we dismantled my traitorous adversaries, started to feel like echoes of a life no longer mine. The cathartic release of justice served should have ushered in a tidal wave of closure, of inner peace regained. So why did I feel so unmoored? Adrift in the vacuum of my own victory? Perhaps it was the sudden quiet, allowing darker reflections to encroach, looming specters of doubt creeping in from the shadows of my mind. What if I went too far in my crusade for vengeance? Sure, Lana and Alex had been snakes, betraying me in unforgivable ways, but the scorched earth demolition of their lives, the relentless and frankly gleeful unraveling of Lana's influence, resources, and very identity, had that crossed some moral event horizon? I tried to shove the thought aside, to revel in my hard-won vindication. But there was no denying the flashes of my own ruthlessness that kept surfacing, unbidden. The cold, unflinching determination to lay waste to anyone and anything standing in my path. Mara's words echoed with disquieting clarity. Lana fancies herself a master manipulator, exploiting the system to her benefit. Well, now she'll learn the true power of that very system when wielded against her. Had I simply become the reverse side of that very same coin? The doubts gnawed and festered, driving me late one night to the very place where this nightmare had begun. My stately home in the suburbs sat hauntingly silent under the pale moonlight. I let myself in with the spare key, wandering from room to empty room like a restless specter. So many memories echoed from every corner, both beautiful and terrible, all now cast in the cold, harsh light of irredeemable deceit. The kitchen, garish and obscene, the den, awash in Dad's mournful admonitions, the bedroom, a blighted sanctuary. By the time I reached the living room fireplace, huddled on the hearth in the darkness, bone-deep weariness threatened to overwhelm me. Who was I now in the ashes of this harrowing ordeal? Some hardened, embittered mercenary of my own vengeance, or a tenacious survivor determined to wrest back her dignity from the jaws of destruction? My gaze drifted over the mantel, lingering on the solitary framed photo, a happier time when the future seemed bright before the first hairline cracks appeared in the facade. I brushed the glass with my fingertips, tears stinging my eyes. How had it all gone so wrong? When did the downward spiral pick up that inexorable momentum towards mutually assured ruination? A soft sound made me stiffen, whirling to find the intruder, only to freeze as Sam padded into the pool of dim light. "Bryn?" She spoke softly, eyes filled with gentle concern. "I got your message. You said you needed." Her voice trailed off as I let the tightly wound mask slip, hot tears spilling in silent streams down my cheeks. It was too much, the weight of this whole shattered saga. I craved the absolution that had always seemed so clear before. But no platitudes came as Sam gathered me in her arms, simply holding on as the anguish of the last several months poured out in ragged sobs. For the first time since uncovering the betrayal, I allowed myself to shatter completely, burying my face in her shoulder as the foundations cracked open and the flood washed over. In that moment of abject brokenness, the hardened shell of victorious Bryn finally disintegrated, leaving only the raw, wounded soul desperate to find its way back towards the light. Perhaps this keening release would prove the catharsis I'd been seeking all along. The purging of toxic rage to make way for rebirth, rising up from the scorched earth left in vengeance's wake. Only time would tell. For now, I simply surrendered to the corrosive waves crashing over me, allowing the last remnants of my former life to dissolve into the ether. My road to healing stretched before me, arduous yet infinitely promising for what lay at its end, inner peace at last reclaimed. As Sam held vigil over my tear-streaked epiphany, the bitter taste of retribution gradually gave way to the promise of something far sweeter on the horizon, a true chance to begin anew. In the weeks following my cathartic breakdown at the old house, a profound shift took hold within me. It started small, rediscovering simple joys like morning coffee on the patio or evening walks around the neighborhood, mundane routines that had been crushed under the weight of trauma and obsession. Gradually, I felt the icy grip of bitterness and anger loosening its hold over my heart, replaced by a dawning sense of freedom and infinite possibility stretching out before me. When the final divorce paperwork arrived with a stark finality, I simply filed it away without fanfare. The severing of that wretched bond with Alex stirred none of the old vengeful urges, only a vaguely bittersweet feeling. Rather than dwell on the death of what was, all my energy channeled towards dreaming of what could be. It all culminated one bright spring morning over brunch with Sam as I announced my decision. "I'm selling the house." She paused, fork laden with Belgian waffle hovering midair. "You are?" "Whoa, that's huge, B." A small smile played over her lips as understanding blossomed. "Symbolic fresh start and all that?" I nodded, unable to contain my own widening grin. "Exactly. That place holds too many toxic memories, like a darkened void I keep getting inextricably pulled back into." I took a deep breath, savoring the rising sense of lightness in my chest. It's time to let go fully and move forward, you know? Sam reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "I'm proud of you for taking that leap," she said simply, eyes shining. We'd come such an unimaginably long way since those early, anguished days following the betrayal's discovery. From there, it was a whirlwind of action, hiring an elite realtor, sorting through our old life's worth of possessions, itemizing what to take and what to discard. With each box taped up, an item crossed off the list, I felt layers of my former self being gently shed and set aside. Finally, the big day arrived with the ringing of the doorbell. A couple straight off the real estate marketing brochure. Young, impeccably dressed, beaming at the prospect of their new dream home as I greeted them with the keys. I led them through the stately foyer towards the living area, though my strides gradually slowed as a clutch of bittersweet memories resurfaced. Flashes of holidays spent with Dad, laughter ringing through the space, recollections of smiling, promising days when this rambling manor had radiated warmth and joy, before the rot had set in and poisoned it all from within. The wife seemed to sense my pensive mood as she laid a gentle hand on my arm. "You've made so many wonderful memories here, I can tell." She gave a reassuring smile. "But I promise we'll fill this place with brand new joys of our own." I blinked, momentarily caught off guard by her perceptiveness, before nodding slowly. "I hope you do." With that, I pressed the keys into her palm and strode out onto the front path one final time. Pausing to drink in the elegant facade for the last time, now divested of its sordid significance. This chapter was officially closed, soon to be replaced by happier days in the making. My journey continued ever onward and upward. Over the next few months, the windfall from the profitable sale, combined with my meager inheritance and court settlement, allowed me to slowly rebuild my life through more positive, rewarding outlets. I rededicated myself to my marketing career with a vengeance, rising swiftly through the ranks and exploring new entrepreneurial opportunities. But even more fulfilling were the passion projects, like spearheading a nonprofit for women affected by abuse and financial dissolution. Each micro act of service, of selfless giving back, was like a healing balm applied against the wounds of my former trauma. Where anger and hatred had once festered, compassion and optimism now blossomed in their place. And when a potential new romantic connection gradually materialized, I felt unshakably self-assured in walking that path, buoyed by the rediscovered strength of my convictions. I was Bryn Ellis, bold survivor reborn. Master of my own destiny, free from the shackles of others' deceptions. The rising dawn of a new lifetime of possibilities stretched gloriously ahead in reverent silence. No further words were required for the shining truth that filled my soul on this day. I had confronted the darkest nights. I had waged the battles that defined me. And from the searing crucible of anguish, I emerged incandescent, inviolable, and infinitely wiser. My vengeance was complete. But more importantly, my true victory had only just begun. The sound of muffled gasps echoed through the cracked door, shattering the illusion I had clung to for far too long. My heart pounded as I pushed the door open, confronted by the sight that would forever shatter my world. Dean, my husband, entangled with another woman on our marital bed. Avery. Dean's eyes widened in panic as he scrambled to cover his naked form. The disheveled woman beside him mirrored his horror, clutching the sheets to her chest. Nausea churned within me, a tsunami of emotions threatening to drown my senses. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of him, not anymore. "Who is she?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and anguish. Dean opened his mouth, but the woman beat him to it. I'm so sorry, I didn't know he was married. Her voice quivered with shame. I turned my gaze back to Dean, searching his face for any semblance of remorse or explanation. But all I found was a cold, calculated mask, a facade he had expertly maintained throughout our marriage. How could you? The words escaped my lips, laced with a pain that cut deeper than any physical wound. Dean's expression hardened, all traces of guilt evaporating. This isn't what it looks like, Avery. You need to understand. Understand what? I spat, incredulous. That you've been lying to me since the day we married? That our entire relationship has been a sham? His eyes narrowed, and for a fleeting moment, I caught a glimpse of the true Dean, the one who had been hiding behind his charming smile and empty promises. You knew what you were getting into, he sneered. I needed someone to take care of my mother, and you were convenient. Don't act so surprised. His words sliced through me like a dagger, leaving me reeling. Suddenly, everything made sense. The way he had distanced himself, the countless nights he claimed to be working late, the emotional void that had grown between us. I swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to betray my resolve. In that moment, a newfound strength surged within me, a determination to break free from the chains of this toxic marriage. You're right, Dean, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I did know what I was getting into, but I also thought there was a chance for us to build something real, something based on love and trust. Clearly, I was wrong. I turned on my heel, pausing at the doorway. Don't worry, I'll take care of your mother. It's the least I can do for the woman who deserves far better than a son like you. With those words, I walked away, leaving behind the shattered remnants of a life I had once believed in. But as the door closed behind me, I felt a weight lifted from my shoulders, the weight of a lie I had been living for far too long. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The illusion had crumbled, and it was time to face the harsh reality of my marriage. In the days that followed, I found solace in the company of the one person who needed me most, Meredith. Dean's mother had been the initial reason I accepted his proposal, but over time, she had become more than just a patient to me. Our bond transcended the confines of a caregiver's duty, blossoming into a genuine connection forged by the cruelty of her son's neglect. As I tended to Meredith, her moments of lucidity revealed glimpses into Dean's past that shook me to my core. The man I had once known was nothing but a facade, meticulously constructed to hide his true nature, a selfish, manipulative being who would stop at nothing to secure his own comfort. He was always a difficult child, Meredith whispered one afternoon, her frail hand clutching mine with surprising strength, so consumed by his own desires, never thinking about the consequences of his actions. I listened intently, my heart aching for the woman who had endured the burden of raising such a callous son. He's draining my accounts, you know, she continued, her eyes filled with a rare clarity. Slowly but surely, he's taking everything I've worked so hard for. My blood boiled at the revelation, but before I could respond, Meredith fixed me with a determined gaze. We have to stop him, Avery. He can't be allowed to get away with this. In that moment, a spark ignited within me, a fierce determination to protect Meredith and ensure that Dean faced the consequences of his actions. We began to devise a plan, a secret pact sealed by the bond we had forged through adversity. As the days turned into weeks, our scheme took shape. I used my medical expertise to gather evidence of Dean's neglect, meticulously documenting every instance of his absence and disregard for his mother's well-being. Meredith, in her moments of clarity, revealed the intricate details of the family's finances, exposing Dean's underhanded dealings and illegal siphoning of funds. He thinks he's so clever, Meredith would say, a glint of triumph in her eyes. But we'll show him. We'll make sure he gets what he deserves. And in those moments, I saw a strength in Meredith that I had never witnessed before, a resilience born from years of enduring her son's cruelty. It was a strength that fueled my own resolve, a fire that burned brighter with each passing day. As our plan solidified, I couldn't help but marvel at the irony of our situation. Dean had brought me into his life as a means to an end, a convenient caretaker to ease his burden. But in doing so, he had unwittingly forged a bond that would ultimately lead to his downfall. With Meredith by my side, I felt a sense of purpose I had never known before. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but one thing was certain. We would not rest until Dean faced the consequences of his actions, and karma had its say. Meredith's health had been deteriorating rapidly, her moments of lucidity becoming increasingly scarce. It pained me to witness her decline, but our shared determination burned brighter than ever before. One evening, as I tended to her, Dean barged into the room, his usual air of indifference replaced by an unsettling look of determination. "Mother, we need to talk," he announced, his tone leaving no room for argument. Meredith regarded him with a weary gaze, her once vibrant eyes dulled by the relentless progression of her condition. "What is it, Dean?" she asked, her voice frail yet laced with a hint of defiance. Dean shifted his gaze towards me, his lips curling into a condescending sneer. "Leave us, Avery. This is a family matter." I opened my mouth to protest, but Meredith beat me to it. "Avery stays," she insisted, her grip tightening around my hand. "Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of her." Dean's nostrils flared, but he seemed to recognize the futility of arguing with his ailing mother. "Very well," he conceded through gritted teeth. "I think it's time we discussed your living arrangements." A chill ran down my spine as the implication of his words sank in. Meredith must have sensed it too, for her expression hardened, her frailty momentarily overshadowed by a steely resolve. "What are you suggesting, Dean?" she demanded, her voice trembling with barely contained emotion. "I've found a wonderful nursing home," Dean began, his tone sickly sweet. "A place where you'll receive round-the-clock care without the burden of staying in this house." My heart pounded in my chest as the true nature of his plan became clear. He intended to strip Meredith of her dignity, her independence, and ultimately her assets. "You can't be serious," I blurted out before I could stop myself. "Meredith has made it abundantly clear that she wants to remain in her home, surrounded by her familiar belongings." Dean shot me a withering glare, his false veneer of concern slipping to reveal the cold, calculating man beneath. "This isn't your decision, Avery," he spat. "Meredith is my mother, and I'll do what's best for her." Meredith's grip tightened around my hand, and I could feel her trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. In that moment, our unspoken pact solidified. We would not let Dean strip away her autonomy without a fight. "I'm not going anywhere," Meredith declared, her voice resonating with a strength I had seldom witnessed. "This is my home, and you have no right to take it away from me." Dean's face contorted with rage, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before our eyes. "You ungrateful old woman," he snarled, taking a menacing step forward. Without hesitation, I placed myself between him and Meredith, my body shielding her from his wrath. "That's enough, Dean," I warned, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. "You've made your intentions clear, and we won't stand for it." A tense silence hung in the air, the weight of our shared defiance palpable. Dean's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched with barely restrained anger, but in that moment I knew we had struck a blow, a crack in his armor that would ultimately lead to his undoing. As he stormed out of the room, I turned to Meredith, our eyes locking in a silent vow. The stakes had been raised, and there was no turning back. We would see this through to the bitter end, no matter the cost. In the wake of Dean's outburst, a newfound sense of urgency propelled our plan forward. We both knew that his threats were not to be taken lightly, and time was of the essence if we were to secure Meredith's well-being and expose his true nature. I channeled my energy into gathering every shred of evidence that could be used against him. With meticulous care, I documented each instance of neglect, every missed appointment, and every callous remark that had fallen from his lips. Meredith, in her moments of clarity, provided invaluable insights into the family's financial records, revealing the breadcrumbs of Dean's deceit. "He thinks he's being so clever," she would say, her eyes alight with determination. "But we'll show him. We'll make sure everyone knows the truth." As our cache of evidence grew, I found myself seeking the counsel of an old friend from nursing school, Julia, a woman whose unwavering moral compass and sharp legal mind had always been a source of inspiration. "Avery, what you're describing is nothing short of elder abuse and financial exploitation," Julia said, her brow furrowed as she pored over the meticulously compiled documents. "With the right legal representation, we can build an airtight case against him." Her words fueled my determination, and together we began laying the groundwork for a legal battle that would shake the foundations of Dean's carefully constructed facade. Throughout this process, I couldn't help but marvel at Meredith's resilience. Despite her failing health, she remained steadfast in her resolve, her moments of lucidity becoming beacons of hope that guided our efforts. "He's always underestimated me," she confided one evening, her frail hand clasping mine with surprising strength. "But this time, he's gone too far." In those moments, I saw the unwavering bond that had formed between us, a bond forged by shared adversity and a thirst for justice. It was a bond that transcended the boundaries of blood and law, and it was this bond that would ultimately be Dean's undoing. With each passing day, our arsenal grew stronger, bolstered by the unwavering support of Julia and the indomitable spirit of Meredith. Dean, in his arrogance, remained oblivious to our machinations, secure in his belief that he held all the cards. Little did he know that the tables were turning, and the very woman he had sought to exploit, the woman he had dismissed as a mere caretaker, would be the one to unravel the web of lies he had so carefully woven. As the pieces fell into place, a sense of anticipation bubbled within me. The road ahead was fraught with challenges, but I knew that with Meredith by my side and the weight of evidence on our side, we would emerge victorious. Dean's reign of cruelty and deceit was drawing to a close, and soon the scales of justice would tip in our favor, delivering the comeuppance he so richly deserved. The tension in the air was palpable as the day of reckoning drew near. Meredith's health had taken a turn for the worse, her moments of lucidity becoming increasingly fleeting. It was a brutal reminder of the urgency that fueled our mission. "We can't wait any longer," Julia said. Her voice hushed as she pored over the meticulously compiled evidence. "If we don't act soon, Dean might succeed in his plan to commit Meredith to that nursing home." Her words sent a chill down my spine, solidifying my resolve. We had come too far to let Dean's cruelty triumph. With careful planning and precision, we orchestrated our escape, a final act of defiance against Dean's machinations. Under the guise of a medical emergency, I arranged for a discreet transport to whisk Meredith away to a secure location far from Dean's reach. The night before our departure, I sat by Meredith's bedside, her frail hand clasped in mine. Her eyes, though dulled by the relentless progression of her condition, shone with a fierce determination that belied her fragile state. "We're almost there, Meredith," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "Soon you'll be safe, and Dean will face the consequences of his actions." A faint smile tugged at the corners of her lips, her grip tightening ever so slightly around my fingers. "I know, my dear," she rasped, "and when this is all over, we'll finally be free." Her words resonated deep within me, echoing the shared yearning for a future untainted by Dean's cruelty. It was a future that had once seemed like a distant dream, but now it was within our grasp. The following morning, I steeled myself for the final act. As the transport team arrived, I busied myself with the pretense of a medical emergency, meticulously staging the scene to sell our ruse. Dean burst into the room, his face contorted with a mixture of concern and annoyance. "What's going on?" he demanded, his gaze flickering between Meredith's still form and the flurry of activity around her. "Your mother's condition has taken a turn," I said, injecting just the right amount of urgency into my voice. "We need to get her to the hospital immediately." For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a glimmer of genuine concern in Dean's eyes, but it was quickly overshadowed by his ever-present selfishness. "Fine, fine," he muttered, waving us off with a dismissive gesture. "Just make sure she's taken care of." Little did he know that those words would come back to haunt him. As the transport team whisked Meredith away, I couldn't help but steal one last glance at Dean, his oblivious form already retreating into the depths of the house. A sense of triumph coursed through my veins, tempered by the knowledge that the true battle was yet to come. With Meredith safely ensconced in our secure location, I turned my attention to the final piece of our plan, a meticulously crafted letter detailing Dean's transgressions in explicit detail. Copies were dispatched to key relatives and authorities, setting the stage for the reckoning that was to come. As I sealed the last envelope, a sense of finality washed over me. The die had been cast, and there was no turning back. But for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. a belief that justice would prevail, and karma would finally catch up to Dean. The calm before the storm had passed, and now the true battle was about to begin. The days following our escape were a whirlwind of activity, as the wheels of justice began to turn. Relatives and authorities, alerted by our meticulously crafted letters, descended upon the situation with a sense of urgency. It was only a matter of time before Dean realized that his carefully constructed world was crumbling around him. True to form, he showed up at our secure location unannounced, his face twisted into a mask of rage. I had been expecting his arrival, and yet the sight of him still sent a chill down my spine. "Where is she?" he snarled, his eyes wild with fury. "Where have you taken my mother?" I met his gaze with a steely resolve, refusing to cower in the face of his wrath. "Meredith is safe," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. "Safe from you and your selfish schemes." Dean's nostrils flared, and for a moment I thought he might lunge at me. But then a sickening smirk spread across his face, and he let out a humorless chuckle. "You think you've won, don't you?" he sneered. "You and that doddering old fool plotting against me like some twisted fantasy." I fought back the urge to strike him, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "It's over, Dean," I said through gritted teeth. "We know everything. The financial exploitation, the neglect, the lies. You've lost." His eyes narrowed and he took a menacing step forward. "You'll never prove anything," he spat. "Without my mother's testimony, you have nothing." In that moment, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "I wouldn't be so sure about that, son." Meredith, frail but resolute, emerged from the shadows, her eyes burning with a fierce determination that belied her fragile state. Dean's jaw dropped, his composure crumbling as he took in the sight of his mother, defiant and unwavering in her support of me. "Mother, what are you doing?" he stammered, his arrogance giving way to a flicker of uncertainty. Meredith met his gaze head-on, her voice steady and unwavering. "I'm doing what I should have done years ago, Dean," she said. "I'm putting an end to your cruelty and deceit." Before Dean could respond, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air, signaling the arrival of the authorities. Julia had been true to her word, coordinating a swift and decisive response to our call for justice. Dean's eyes darted around in panic, his carefully cultivated facade crumbling before our eyes. "This is insane," he muttered, his words laced with desperation. "You'll all pay for this." But his threats rang hollow, as the officers burst through the door, their stern expressions leaving no room for negotiation. As they read him his rights and placed him under arrest, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication wash over me. The man who had so callously manipulated and exploited us was finally facing the consequences of his actions. Meredith's hand found mine, her grip surprisingly strong despite her frailty. "It's over," she whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We did it." In that moment, the weight of our shared struggle lifted, replaced by a profound sense of relief and triumph. The road ahead was still fraught with challenges, but for the first time in years I felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that justice would prevail and karma would have its say. As Dean was led away in handcuffs, his defiant glare burned into my memory, a stark reminder of the battles yet to come. But I knew, with Meredith by my side, we would face those battles head-on, armed with the strength of our bond and the conviction that righteousness would triumph over cruelty. The confrontation had been won, but the war was just beginning. The days leading up to the trial were a whirlwind of activity as our legal team worked tirelessly to assemble the damning evidence against Dean. The weight of his crimes was staggering. Financial exploitation, elder abuse, and a litany of other offenses that painted a picture of a man consumed by greed and selfishness. As I sat in the courtroom, surrounded by the solemn faces of the jury, I couldn't help but steal a glance at Dean. His once confident demeanor had been replaced by a sullen, hollow expression, a far cry from the arrogant man who had so brazenly exploited his own mother. Meredith, her strength bolstered by the unwavering support of our legal team, took the stand with a grace and determination that belied her frailty. As she recounted the years of neglect and manipulation at the hands of her son, her voice rang out with a clarity that seemed to pierce the very soul of the courtroom. "He was always a difficult child," she said, her gaze unwavering as she locked eyes with Dean. but I never imagined he would stoop so low as to exploit his own mother's illness for personal gain. Dean's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing into a defiant glare. But Meredith remained steadfast, her words carrying the weight of a lifetime of pain and disappointment. "I trusted him," she continued, her voice thick with emotion. "I trusted him to care for me, to honor the sacrifices I made as a mother. But instead he saw me as a means to an end, a source of wealth and convenience to be exploited." The courtroom fell into a hushed silence, the gravity of Meredith's testimony hanging heavily in the air. Even Dean seemed momentarily subdued, his usual bravado faltering in the face of his mother's searing indictment. As the trial progressed, the weight of the evidence against Dean became insurmountable. Financial records, witness testimonies, and a mountain of documentation painted a damning portrait of a man driven by greed and manipulation. Throughout it all, Dean maintained a veneer of defiance, lashing out at the prosecution and attempting to discredit the testimony against him. But his efforts were futile, his desperate attempts to cling to control only serving to further underscore the depth of his depravity. In the end, the verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. As the judge handed down Dean's sentence, a hush fell over the courtroom. For years he had operated under the delusion that his actions would go unchecked, that he could exploit and manipulate without consequence. But in that moment, the reality of his crimes came crashing down upon him, his facade of entitlement and arrogance stripped away to reveal the pathetic, desperate man beneath. As the bailiffs led him away, his eyes met mine for a fleeting moment, and in that instant, I saw a glimmer of something I had never witnessed before. Fear. Fear of the consequences he had brought upon himself, fear of the reckoning that had finally caught up to him. It was a fear born not only of the legal repercussions, but of the knowledge that his own mother had been the one to deliver the final blow, shattering the illusion of control he had so desperately clung to. In the aftermath of the trial, Meredith and I found solace in the knowledge that justice had been served. The weight of Dean's cruelty had been lifted, and a newfound sense of freedom washed over us. As we embraced, tears of relief streaming down our faces, I couldn't help but marvel at the strength of the bond we had forged, a bond that had withstood the tempest of Dean's manipulation and emerged victorious. "We did it," Meredith whispered, her eyes shining with a clarity I had seldom witnessed. "We showed him that karma always wins in the end." In that moment, I understood the true power of our shared journey, a journey that had transcended the boundaries of family and circumstance, forging an unbreakable bond rooted in love, resilience, and an unwavering belief in the triumph of justice over cruelty. As we looked ahead to the future, unburdened by the specter of Dean's malice, I knew that our bond would endure. A testament to the indomitable spirit that had carried us through the darkest of times, and a beacon of hope for all those who dared to stand against the forces of greed and exploitation. Karma had spoken, and in its wake a new chapter was about to begin. The aftermath of Dean's sentencing was a whirlwind of activity, as Meredith and I set about reclaiming the life that had been so cruelly disrupted by his greed and manipulation. With the legal proceedings behind us, we were finally free to forge a new path, unburdened by the weight of his cruelty. The first order of business was securing Meredith's well-being. Utilizing the assets that had been rightfully restored to her, we spared no expense in ensuring she received the highest quality of care. A team of dedicated professionals was assembled, and a state-of-the-art home health setup was established, complete with around-the-clock nursing and all the amenities necessary to provide Meredith with the comfort and dignity she deserved. As the weeks passed, I witnessed a remarkable transformation in Meredith. The cloud of fear and uncertainty that had once hung over her seemed to lift, replaced by a newfound sense of peace and contentment. Her moments of lucidity became more frequent, and in those precious instances, the true depth of her resilience shone through. "Look at us, Avery," she would say, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of joy and disbelief. "Who would have thought that we'd come out on the other side of this, stronger than ever?" Her words never failed to fill me with a sense of awe and admiration. This woman, who had endured the unimaginable betrayal of her own son, had emerged from the ashes of that trauma with a grace and fortitude that humbled me to my core. As for Dean, His name became a taboo subject in our household. The mere mention of him carried the weight of 1,000 wounds, a reminder of the pain and suffering he had inflicted upon us. In those rare moments when his specter loomed, Meredith would simply shake her head, a sad smile playing upon her lips. "He made his choices," she would say, her voice tinged with a hint of pity, "and now he has to live with the consequences." It was a sentiment that resonated deeply with me, a testament to the power of karmic justice and the indomitable strength of the human spirit. In the months that followed, our bond only grew stronger, forged in the fires of our shared struggle and tempered by the triumphs we had achieved together. We became more than just caretaker and patient. We were family, bound by a love and respect that transcended blood ties. As Meredith's health stabilized, we began to explore the world beyond the confines of her home, venturing out on small excursions that filled us both with a sense of wonder and freedom. Every outing was a celebration, a reminder of the precious moments we had fought so hard to reclaim. On one such outing, as we strolled through a beautiful park, Meredith paused, her gaze fixed on a family playing nearby. A wistful smile tugged at her lips, and she turned to me, her eyes shining with a depth of emotion that took my breath away. "This is what it's all about, Avery," she said softly. "These moments, these precious flashes of joy and love, that's what makes life worth living." In that instant, I understood the true weight of her words. Our journey had been fraught with pain and heartache, but it had also forged an unbreakable bond, a testament to the power of love and resilience in the face of adversity. As we continued our walk hand in hand, I couldn't help but a sense of profound gratitude wash over me. The road had been long and arduous, but we had emerged victorious, our spirits tempered by the fires of our shared struggle. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, united by a bond that could never be broken, a bond forged in the crucible of karma's reckoning and strengthened by the indomitable spirit that had carried us through the darkest of times. The future stretched out before us, a tapestry of endless possibilities, and as we looked ahead, I saw not just a new beginning, but a life filled with hope, love, and the unwavering belief that justice would always prevail over cruelty. For in the end, karma had spoken, and its voice would echo through the ages, a testament to the enduring power of righteousness and the indomitable strength of the human spirit. The cheery graduation music clashed with the pit in my stomach as I watched Derek chuck down yet another glass of cheap champagne. He grinned ear to ear, slurring drunken congratulations to our grandson Mason. Something was off about his jovial demeanor. As the reception wound down, I offered to take Mason home, silently dreading the drive back to Derek's house. The place still reeked of my daughter-in-law Jenna's perfume, the sickly sweet smell of fakery. Mason passed out in the back seat before we even left the parking lot. In the rearview mirror, I caught Derek sauntering up behind a group of his sleazy poker buddies, their laughter carrying across the windswept lot. "Can you believe that ditz finally did me a favor and took off?" Derek's words knocked the air from my lungs. "Just think of all the insurance money I'll rake in." The guys roared with laughter, pounding Derek's back like he'd just been crowned king. My hands gripped the wheel as flashes of memories assaulted me. Jenna's trembling smile barely concealing her silent tears, the scribbled note tucked in her journal hidden in the attic. "If you're reading this, Derek has finally gone too far." In that moment, my suspicions solidified into a grotesque reality. The monster I'd watched my daughter fall for, blinded by young lust and his empty promises, had somehow won. Jenna was gone, or worse, all for Derek's greed. The engine revved as I tore out of the lot, Mason jolting awake next to me. "Wow, Grandma, what's the rush?" I steadied my shaking voice, speaking the half-truth I'd been rehearsing for weeks. "Nothing, honey. I just really need to get home." That night, after tucking Mason into the guest room, I pulled out the secret box I'd been stashing in the attic ventilator. Jenna's meager collection of belongings, all that remained of my daughter-in-law's shattered life. Her tattered journal landed in my lap with a thud, my fingers tracing the indentation where her last words were scratched in frantic desperation. "If you're reading this, Derek has finally gone too far. Keep this safe, and keep an eye on Mason." The implications choked me. How long had she suspected Derek's malice? What hell had she been enduring while we all blissfully looked the other way? Hot tears streamed down my cheeks. No more. I swiped them away, my jaw clenching in resolve. Derek's monstrous arrogance had handed me all the evidence I needed. It was time to strike. Over the next few weeks, I watched Derek with hawkish scrutiny. His exuberant spending and boisterous laughter raised eyebrows all over town. New Italian suits, a sports car in cherry red, reservations at the ritziest steakhouses. Living it up since the deadweight ditched him, his vile friends would snicker over bourbon and cigars. I clenched my fists until my nails dug crescents into my palms. How dare he satirize Jenna's disappearance so brazenly? My sweet, gentle daughter-in-law, who showered loves on Mason and showered me with hugs even after Derek's affair. Her words from our last lunch echoed in my mind. "I think he's up to something, Mom. I've found things, but I'm afraid if I pry, he'll lash out." I shuddered, realizing her disappearance may have saved her life. But from what exactly? I needed answers. My first stop was the bank, requesting statements for all of Derek's accounts, a ploy I spun as concerning for his sudden affluent spending. The documents told a story of deception, maxed credit, compounding gambling debts owed to some terrifying names, and a 7-figure life insurance payout scheduled just weeks after Jenna's disappearance. My blood boiled. That smirking, materialistic snake wasn't grieving. He was cashing in on his wife's vanishing act. I longed to confront him but fought off my rage, knowing I'd need an incredible smokescreen to take him down. Next, I turned my sights on Jenna's inner circle, starting with Tara, her closest work friend. He had money troubles, big ones, Tara confided over a hushed brunch, and Jenna suspected he was unfaithful again, though she never confided details with me. She wrung her hands, voice cracking. "I'm just so worried "I know," I stated firmly, "which is why we're going to find her." Tara's eyes burned with promise. "Whatever you need." With an ally and a trail of evidence, Phase 1 was complete. As satisfying as lashing out at Derek felt, I knew I'd have to be patient and judicious. The path ahead would require deft precision. One false move and Mason's safety would be jeopardized. My grandson's life hung in the balance, and I'd be damned if I allowed that snake Derek to slither his way out of this. It was time to enlist some professional assistance from a friend who'd spent his life hunting reprobates like Derek. Phase 2 required calling in the big guns, starting with hitting up my old pal Raymond. Raymond's brow furrowed as he pored over the paper trail I'd compiled on Derek. Bank statements, phone records, even a sordid photo from the strip club where he'd been caught cheating months ago. "This is one twisted character you're dealing with," he muttered, shoving the stack aside with a disgusted huff. "But it's a good start." I bristled at his nonchalance. "A start? Ray, that praved con man plotted to kill my Jenna." Raymond's eyes softened as he reached for my hand. "I know, Elle, and we'll nail that bastard's hide to the wall. But we've got to be meticulous, build an airtight case piece by damning piece." Grinding my teeth, I gave a reluctant nod. As a retired police captain, Raymond knew how to play this sadistic game. As much as I craved to barge in, fist-swinging, cooler heads had to prevail, especially for Mason's sake. That poor kid had been fed lie after lie by his father, thinking his beloved mother simply took off. The thought of him trapped in Derek's clutches made my skin crawl. Over the next several days, Raymond and I built a coordinate strike, burning the midnight oil over whiskey and case files. He leveraged his old officer contacts to unearth the sordid details: Derek's bookies, his side chicks, and most damning of all, the inflated life insurance premium he'd started paying weeks before Jenna's vanishing. "There's our motive," Raymond said, tapping the document. He quite literally took out a policy on her life before attempting to, well... A lump formed in my throat as I considered the depths of Derek's depravity. What's more, as a teacher with modest earnings, Jenna had been blindsided by the massive payout. No wonder Derek was living so large. With every clue, the picture became clearer. He'd been setting the stage to cash in, all while keeping my beloved girl-in-law clueless to his sinister plot. The dizzying realization made me queasy. Just as I steadied my breath, Raymond slid another photo across the table. Derek stumbling from a sleazy motel room, lips smeared in tawdry lipstick, his sly grin stretching ear to ear. This was taken 3 days after Jenna went missing. Raymond said grimly. Care to guess who our friend in the cowboy hat is? I squinted at the petite blonde emerging behind Derek, her face partially obscured but still achingly familiar. Tara, Jenna's friend. The same young woman who had just promised to help us bring her down. The deception left me seething as my fists clenched. I should have known that snake couldn't be trusted. But then it hit me. What if this was merely another strategic deception, one that could play perfectly into our trap? A slow smile spread across my lips. Oh, she's going to help us all right, I purred, snatching up the incriminating photo. More than she'll ever know. Raymond cocked an eyebrow but said nothing, wise enough to let me take the reins. He simply refilled his glass as I outlined my master plan, one that would leverage every last player on the chessboard to protect Mason and bury Derek once and for all. Revenge, like justice, would be best served piping hot. The family dinner was a dry run for my grand inquisition of Derek. Raymond and I had meticulously assembled every document, every photo, an overwhelming case to dismantle his lies once and for all. Yet a bigger challenge loomed: Mason. His allegiance was still divided between his beloved late mother and his manipulative, very much alive father. I had to tread carefully, protecting him from the full, sordid truth, until Derek's defenses were shattered. Mason eyed me cautiously from across the table as I laid out the bread and salad. Derek, ever the arrogant fool, filled his wineglass to the brim, oblivious to the reckoning on the horizon. "You've seemed awfully preoccupied lately, Elaine," he said with a smirk. "Everything okay over there in Vinegar Villa?" I bristled but maintained my poise. "Everything is fine, Derek. I've just been catching up on some reading." His brow arched in mock concern. "Oh, do tell. Maybe I can recommend a nice work of fiction to lift your spirits." The venom in his voice was palpable. This smug bastard had no shame, did he? No matter, I'd wipe that Cheshire grin off his face soon enough. Suppressing a twisted smile, I retrieved the thick manila folder tucked under my seat. "Actually, I've been studying up on much more riveting literature. The kind with pictures." With a flat thump, I slapped the folder on the table, its contents spilling free: crime scene photos, bank statements, Inizined motel stills. Raymond remained stoic, but Derek's complexion drained of color. "The hell is this?" he sputtered. "The truth," I said evenly. I turned to Mason. "Something your father seems allergic to." Mason's eyes darted between Derek and me. Horrified confusion splashed across his face. "Dad, what?" "Don't listen to her, son," Derek spat, sweat beading his brow. "Your grandma's had too much goddamn Pinot and—" "I've had enough," I roared, slamming my fists on the table. "Enough of your lies, your philandering, your vile disrespect for Jenna and this whole family." Wine sloshed from overturned glasses as Derek shot to his feet. "How dare you, you conniving old bat! You've gone and lost your damn mind." Raymond rose like a monolith beside me, his baritone voice cutting through the commotion. "Can it, dirtbag? The Hashers are all here, therapists, clergy, everyone who gave a damn about Jenna. We've got enough to put you away for—" I tuned out the legal jargon, focusing on Mason. Shock and horror contorted his boyish features as the weight of the truth crashed over him in waves. My heart ached to shield him from this pain, this ultimate betrayal. Tears streamed down his face as he turned to Derek. "Dad, what did you do?" Derek's face reddened. For an instant, I pitied the boy still clinging to his father's imaged nobility. Then reality struck in the form of Derek's chilling backhand. "You'll do as I say, you disrespectful little—" I moved on instinct, my elbow catching his ribs with a sickening crack before Raymond hauled him back. The beast's true colors raged to the fore, mercilessly unleashed on his only child. As Mason crumpled to the floor, I rushed to his side, pulling him close. He sobbed into my chest, so fragile, yet still clinging to hope. Hope that for once, truth would finally prevail over lies, and I would ensure it did, no matter how much carnage the gathering storm would leave in its wake. The aftermath of Derek's public meltdown was a blur. Mason refused to speak to or even look at his father, staying glued to my side like a terrified child. I didn't blame him. That ruthless slap had finally shattered the illusion of Derek's hollow paternal facade. As for Derek himself, he ricocheted between blustering threats and sniveling pleas as Raymond's cop buddies hauled him away on suspicion of domestic violence. Of course, it was merely the tip of the iceberg, but an important first step to strip away his freedom and his cockiness. "I want that smug prick to feel the walls closing in from every angle," Raymond assured me later that evening over straight whiskeys. We'd reassembled at his place to regroup, poring over the meticulously assembled case files and devising our multi-pronged attack strategy. With Derek safely tucked away, we could accelerate our efforts without him slithering free. "First order of business is protecting Mason," I said, jaw clenched. "He's not going anywhere near that snake again until the venom's been completely extracted." Raymond nodded grimly. "Agreed. We'll get emergency custody pushed through so he's fully in your care. Judges will side with us, especially after that sick display." "Good." I drained my glass, relishing the slow burn at the back of my throat. "Because the bastard crossed the final line when he struck that boy. Everything from here on out is scorched earth." For the next several hours, we assembled our chess pieces. Anonymous tips firing off to the police about Derek's illicit gambling, shady business dealings, and possible crimes against Jenna. A meticulous forensic audit to freeze every last penny of his assets, smokescreen transactions designed to panic him into revealing his hand. Finally, we formed the centerpiece, a meticulously planned sting operation to catch Derek red-handed in the midst of his next infidelity. This one to be captured on video and splashed across every social media feed in town. I grinned wolfishly as Raymond outlined the tech specs: special lenses and ultra-encrypted streaming links primed to broadcast Derek's lies and lechery to a hand-picked audience of influential friends, employers, anyone who could maximize his public flaming. He'll be so disgraced, so hamstrung by looming charges, that rolling over and confessing everything will be his only chance to try saving face. Raymond purred, clearly relishing the intricacies of our ornate takedown. I simply nodded, adrenaline thrumming through my veins as visions of Derek's unraveling danced before me. He deserved far worse than a fractured reputation or quelched finances. Budding Mason, my poor, innocent grandson, that unforgivable sin warranted the harshest karmic vengeance this life could serve, and I would be its sword of deliverance. Draining the last amber dregs from my glass, I turned to Raymond with a feral gleam. "Let's make that bastard bleed." The sting was going off without a hitch. Tara had lured Derek to the seedy downtown motel with practiced precision, her coquettish texts and promises of fun speaking directly to his baser impulses. From my discreet staging point down the hall, I could hear the telltale sounds of Derek's arrival, his arrogant bravado greeting Tara, that familiar slithery tone that made my skin crawl. "Well, hello there, gorgeous. You're looking even tastier than those pictures you sent." Tara's flirtatious girlish giggle was practically theatrical. "You always were the charmer, Mr. Sullivan. Now why don't you come on inside and let me take care of you?" I had to commend her committed performance, especially knowing that less than 48 hours earlier, I'd strong-armed her into cooperating by showing the proof of her previous trysts with Derek. The fear in those big doe eyes told me all I needed to know. As Derek's oily chuckle faded behind the closed door, Raymond emerged from the shadows, holding up a tiny microchip between his fingers. "Cameras are hot and transmitting to our secure channel. Time to go live." We slipped on our headsets and tapped into the feed just as Derek was peeling off Tara's satiny robe, his meaty paws groping her lithe frame with shameless entitlement. God, I've missed this body. The lewd image was merely prelude for the fireworks to come. I thought of Mason, still recovering from his own traumatic disillusionment, and my righteous resolve strengthened. Expose this charlatan for the abusive, self-serving creep he was. That was the only path to justice. On Raymond's mark, our crew activated a precise digital operation, one that broadcasted the live stream to very specific trusted contacts: church leaders, Derek's employers, charity figureheads, upstanding people mortified to see one of their own engaged in such debased improprieties. Pandemonium erupted as our network expanded exponentially across the small town, the shock and horror reverberating through the entire community. The calls and messages deluged my phone in a barrage of disgust and repudiation, and through it all, Derek remained oblivious to his unraveling, rutting away on that tawdry motel room bed, at least until Raymond's gruff voice broke through the speakers. "Having fun there, dirtbag." Derek froze, his bulging face snapping up in wild-eyed panic. What? What is this? A reckoning, Raymond replied coolly. One that's coming at you from all sides, thanks to that cute little video feed you're starring in. At that moment, Derek's phone began ringing off the hook, every busybody and professional contact bearing witness to his brazen indiscretions. His frantic howls and fumbled attempts to kill the stream were utterly fruitless. The depraved spectacle was live for the world to see. Somewhere in that pathetic display of panic and shame, I was dimly aware of Tara gathering her clothes and darting from the room. Her part in our charade was over. Mine, however, was just beginning. Time for the snake's final constriction. Straightening my spine, I strode down the hallway with purpose. The door opened before I could even knock. There stood Derek, his sweaty, horrified face almost subhuman at this point. I locked eyes with the wretched creature, letting the waves of reviled anger wash over me. "Hello, Derek," I said coldly. "We need to talk." Derek's world was crumbling. I could see it in his wild, desperate eyes as he stared back at me in the dingy motel room, utterly shell-shocked. This has to be some kind of mistake," he stammered, struggling to cover his nakedness. "You can't seriously think I'd—" "Save it," I snapped, his pathetic excuses like sandpaper against my resolve. "The jig is up, Derek. We have everything. The affairs, the gambling, the insurance scam you tried to run on Jenna. It's all been exposed." He recoiled as if struck, his bravado finally deflating under the weight of his sins laid bare. Raymond emerged from the hallway, arms crossed like a sentry guarding an inmate. 2 uniformed officers flanked him, eyes scanning Derek with undisguised repulsion. "We've got enough to put you away for a long time, Sullivan," Raymond growled. "But even prison will be a cakewalk compared to the beatdown your reputation's about to take." As if on cue, Derek's phone erupted again, a cacophony of shrill rings and pinging text notifications. The shock, the scorn of his community discovering his web of depravity in such dramatic fashion. I watched as he picked it up with a shaking hand, scrolling through the onslaught of vitriol numbly. This can't be real," he whispered, complexion blanching. "I'm ruined." "Not yet you aren't," I said with chilling finality. "But you can start making amends right now by telling us the truth about Jenna." Derek's roomy gaze flicked up to bore into mine, twin vortices of panic and hatred swirling in their depths. In that moment, I caught a glimpse of the darkness that must have consumed my sweet Jenna's final days, the insidious dread she felt around this man she'd once loved. My stomach turned, but I held my steely glare. "What did you do?" For a span of harrowing seconds, Derek was utterly mute, the whirlwind of his sins rendering him catatonic. Just when I began to lose hope, his thin lips parted once more. "I just wanted out," he croaked, voice barely audible. "The debts, the money problems. I thought if I could just make her disappear, that big insurance payout would solve it all." The words hung heavy in the fetid air, a damning admission of his greed and monstrosity. Raymond tensed beside me, but I raised a hand to stay him. I needed to hear the unvarnished truth. "But Jenna, she must have suspected something," Derek continued, his voice dropping to a guttural rasp. "I started clearing out the accounts, keeping her in the dark, anything to keep the payout intact after I took care of her. But she caught wind and bailed. Took off with nothing but a damn ringful of cash from her jewelry box." My heart clenched as hatred bubbled through me like acidic bile. This whole sordid nightmare, every agonizing uncertainty Jenna must have endured in those final weeks, all because her husband craved an easier life. I wanted to unleash a scream, a torrent of sadistic punches, anything to absolve this rage. But I stayed my hand, letting the icy silence eviscerate Derek's soul. Because in this moment, I realized my revenge was complete. He was already in hell, forged of the very lies and betrayal he'd callously inflicted on everyone around him. The stain of his sins would never wash off. So as the police closed in, wrenching his arms behind his back, I simply watched in hollow triumph. No satisfaction, no feeling of release. The monster's secret was out, his freedom forfeit. But at what cost had this justice come? The question haunted me, as Derek was hauled away in disgrace. At last, the search for Jenna could begin in earnest. I only prayed that this nightmare's ending would allow for a shred of healing to take root. The call came just after midnight. Raymond's gruff voice crackling through the line with a mixture of elation and sheer disbelief. "We found her, Elaine. Jenna's alive." My legs buckled as the words washed over me, equal parts rapture and terror paralyzing my every nerve. After weeks of feverish searching, haunted by visions of her scared face from that hidden attic journal, she was out there somewhere, safe. Raymond relayed the details. An anonymous tip from a diner waitress in Santa Fe who recognized Jenna's photo from the news broadcasts. Apparently she'd been serving there under an assumed name, laying low as a refugee from her own life. Relief and rage churned through me in sickening waves. While Derek rotted in jail awaiting trial, my poor girl had spent months as a fractured ghost, severed from her loved ones by the man who vowed to honor and protect her. But she was safe. That mantra alone propelled my shaking feet into action, every maternal instinct roaring to reunite with my unsung warrior. The airport's fluorescent lights stung my weary eyes, but I blinked past their glare, scanning every haggard face passing through customs. At last a familiar figure emerged, chocolate ringlets framing her hollow cheeks, her slender frame seeming to hunch under an immense invisible weight. "Mom?" she whispered, tentative and childlike. That was all it took to release the torrent. With a strangled cry, I gathered Jenna into my arms, clinging to her fragile bird bones as the dam burst. We sank to our knees in a tangle of sobs, fear and regret, and blessed relief whirling around us in a maelstrom. "You're safe," I gasped between heaving breaths. "Oh God, you're safe." For long moments, we were lost in our raw reunion, willfully blind to the churning current of life swirling around us. When at last Jenna leaned back, her eyes were glassy yet shining with a rekindled spark. "How?" she stammered, the word more rugged gasp than true question. I stroked her matted curls, grimacing at how frail and hounded she looked. No mother should ever have to see their child in such pain. "It's over," I said firmly, steadying my voice. Derek confessed everything. With help from Raymond and some other supporters, he was exposed and arrested for what he did. All the debts, affairs, everything. "It's finished." A tremulous sigh escaped her, somewhere between anguish and blissful release. "So he'll never hurt me again?" "Never," I said, pulling her close, "and I'll make damn sure that snake never gets within a mile of my family ever again." Jenna stiffened at that, pulling back with a panicked look. "Oh God, Mason! Is he?" "Hey now, it's all right." I raised a soothing hand, unwinding the knot of fear in her gut. "Mason's safe and sound, sweetie. He's with me for now, tucked away from all the ugliness. As soon as you're ready, we'll be a family again." Her hand trembled as it found mine, squeezing with the first embers of a familiar strength flickering back to life in those lost hazel eyes. "I don't know how I'll ever thank you for not giving up on me." I gave her a reassuring look as my own tears flowed freely. "Sometimes revenge is what gets you through the night, baby girl. But for a mother's love?" I pressed my forehead to hers, savoring our reunion as a brilliant new dawn broke on the horizon. That burning light will always lead me home. I stared at my phone in disbelief, the words on the screen blurring as my vision clouded with tears. It was a simple text message, but one that shattered the foundation of my life, with 3 brutal words: "I want a divorce." Trent's message continued, each sentence like a dagger to my heart. "I've been having an affair with Lila, and I'm leaving you to be with her. It's over between us." My hands trembled as I clutched the phone, a maelstrom of emotions raging within me. Anger, betrayal, and devastation fought for dominance, leaving me breathless and nauseous. Trent's timing couldn't have been worse. He sent this bombshell while I was at the grocery store, surrounded by the mundane sights and sounds of everyday life. In that instant, my world crumbled around me, and I found myself lost in a surreal nightmare. As I stepped outside, the crisp evening air did little to calm the storm brewing inside me. My phone buzzed again, and I flinched, bracing myself for another blow. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," Trent's message read. "I want full custody of the kids, and I'm going to fight for the house." Fury ignited within me, burning away the initial shock and pain. How dare he think he could just discard me and our family like yesterday's trash? After everything we'd been through together, all the sacrifices I'd made for him and our children, this was how he repaid me? "You lying, cheating bastard!" I shouted, drawing bewildered stares from passers-by. I didn't care. The dam had burst, and years of bottled emotions came pouring out. My phone rang, and Trent's name flashed on the screen. I answered, my voice trembling with rage. "How could you do this to us?" "Cass, please understand," Trent began, his tone maddeningly calm. "I've fallen in love with Lila, and she makes me happy in a way you haven't for years." "Happy?" I spat. "You selfish prick. What about the vows we made? What about our children?" "I'm sorry, but it's over," he said flatly. "I'll be coming by to collect my things tomorrow." The line went dead, leaving me standing in the parking lot, shaking with fury and disbelief. Tears streamed down my face, but I refused to let them diminish the fire raging within me. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The meek, accommodating Cassidy, who had devoted herself to her family, was gone, replaced by a woman who would fight tooth and nail for what was rightfully hers. No longer would I be a doormat for Trent's ego and indiscretions. If he thought he could just walk away and start a new life, leaving me and the kids to fend for ourselves, he was sorely mistaken. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This was war, and I would show no mercy. With renewed determination, I marched back to my car, my mind already plotting my next moves. Trent wanted a battle? He was going to get one. And by the time I was done with him, he'd regret the day he ever betrayed me. The next morning, I woke with a pounding headache, a reminder of the emotional turmoil I'd endured the night before. But the ache in my heart was far worse than any physical pain. I forced myself out of bed, determined to confront the harsh realities of my new existence. First on the agenda, gathering evidence of Trent's betrayal. I rifled through his dresser drawers, my hands shaking as I uncovered damning proof, hotel receipts, charges for expensive jewelry, and worse, dozens of text messages exchanged with his little tramp Lila. "You're the only one for me, baby," one message read. "I can't wait to start our life together." Bile rose in my throat as I scanned through their sickening exchanges, each one more explicit than the last. How could the man I'd loved and trusted for over 15 years be capable of such depravity? The sound of the front door opening snapped me out of my daze. I shoved the evidence back into the drawer and hurried downstairs, steeling myself for the confrontation. Trent stood in the foyer, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. His gaze was cold, devoid of the warmth and affection I'd once cherished. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "I told you, I'm here to collect my things," he said coolly. "Now, if you'll excuse me—" "Like hell I will," I stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "You think you can just waltz in and out of our lives like nothing happened?" Trent's eyes narrowed. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Cass. We're done, and it's time for both of us to move on." "Move on?" I let out a bitter laugh. "You've got some nerve, you cheating piece of—" "Watch your mouth," he snapped. "And don't act so high and mighty. You know things haven't been right between us for years." His words stung, but I refused to let him see how deeply they cut. "That's no excuse for what you've done," I hissed. "You betrayed me, betrayed our family, all for some young floozy." Trent's face flushed with anger. "Don't you dare talk about Lila that way. She's 10 times the woman you'll ever be." In that moment, something inside me snapped. Before I could stop myself, my hand lashed out, connecting with Trent's cheek in a resounding slap. He recoiled, clutching his face in shock. "You crazy bitch! Get out!" I screamed, shoving him toward the door. "Get out of my house and don't ever come back." Trent glared at me, his eyes burning with hatred. Without another word, he turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I sank to the floor, my body racked with sobs. Amid the pain and heartbreak, a new emotion took root, a burning desire for revenge. Trent thought he could discard me like yesterday's garbage? Well, he was gravely mistaken. I would make him pay for every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of anguish he'd put me through. As I regained my composure, a plan began to form. I couldn't win by playing fair, not against a man as ruthless and self-serving as Trent. No, I would have to fight fire with fire, and I knew just the person who could help me do it. Reaching for my phone, I dialed the number of my best friend, Jenna. If anyone could help me bring Trent to his knees, it was her. "Jenna," I said, my voice thick with determination, "I need your help. It's time to make that bastard pay." Jenna arrived at my doorstep within the hour, her expression a mix of concern and fury. "That lying snake? She seethed as she pulled me into a tight embrace. I can't believe he did this to you. I fought back tears, determined not to let Trent's betrayal break me. Believe it, I said bitterly. The proof is right upstairs. Together we rifled through the damning evidence I'd uncovered, the hotel receipts, the jewelry charges, the sordid text exchanges. With each new revelation, Jenna's outrage grew. We have to make him pay, she declared, her eyes blazing with righteous anger. He can't be allowed to get away with this. I nodded, my resolve hardening. Trent thinks he can just walk away and start a new life with that little tramp, but he's got another thing coming. Jenna squeezed my hand, offering a supportive smile. Whatever you need, I'm here for you. We'll take that bastard down together. Over the next few days, Jenna became my rock, my confidant, and my co-conspirator. We pored over every detail of Trent's deception, looking for any angle we could exploit. It didn't take long to uncover his underhanded financial maneuvers, secret accounts, offshore holdings, all designed to leave me penniless while he rode off into the sunset with his new plaything. That deceitful son of a bitch, Jenna snarled as we pieced together the paper trail. He's been planning this for months, maybe years. Well, his little scheme ends now, I said, my voice steely with determination. I won't let him take everything I've worked for. With Jenna's help, I began gathering ammunition, records, bank statements, anything that could be used as evidence against Trent. We would hit him where it hurt, his bank account and his precious reputation. As the days passed, I could feel a remarkable shift taking place within me. The meek, downtrodden woman I'd been was fading away, replaced by a fierce, unstoppable force driven by a thirst for justice. Gone were the self-doubts and insecurities that had plagued me for so long. In their place was a newfound confidence, a belief in my own strength and resilience. I started taking better care of myself, hitting the gym and revamping my wardrobe. With each passing day, I felt more powerful, more in control of my destiny. Jenna noticed the change, too. Look at you, she remarked one afternoon, a proud grin spreading across her face. You're like a phoenix rising from the ashes. I flashed her a sly smile. You ain't seen nothing yet. By the time I'm done with Trent, he'll be the one reduced to ashes. Trent had made the mistake of underestimating me, of thinking I would simply roll over and accept his betrayal. Well, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. As I pored over the mounting evidence, plotting my next move, a delicious sense of anticipation washed over me. The game was afoot, and I was playing for keeps. Trent wanted a war. He was going to get one, and by the time the smoke cleared, he would rue the day he ever crossed Cassidy Monroe. A week had passed since Trent's abrupt departure, and I was ready to strike. Jenna and I had gathered enough evidence to bury him 10 times over, but I wanted the satisfaction of seeing the fear in his eyes when he realized his carefully laid plans were unraveling. I arranged for us to meet at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in the city where we used to love grabbing Sunday brunch. The sight of it twisted my gut, but I refused to let Trent take that from me, too. He arrived exactly at noon, his expression a mixture of confusion and thinly veiled arrogance. Cass, he said coolly as he slid into the booth across from me. This is a surprise. I met his gaze, my own eyes steely with resolve. Cut the crap, Trent. You know exactly why I asked you here. His bravado faltered for just a moment before the smug mask slipped back into place. If this is about the divorce, I thought I made myself clear. This is about a lot more than that, I interrupted, sliding a thick manila envelope across the table. Why don't you take a look inside? Trent eyed the envelope warily, but his curiosity got the better of him. With a dismissive shrug, he tore it open and began rifling through the contents, bank statements, investment records, all documenting the illicit financial web he'd spun. His face paled as the realization set in. Where did you get these? He hissed, his eyes darting around the cafe. That's not important, I said coolly. What matters is that I know everything, the secret accounts, the offshore holdings, all of it. Trent's hands trembled with barely contained rage. You conniving little... I'd watch my tone if I were you, I warned, reveling in his discomfort, unless you want all of this finding its way into the hands of the IRS and your precious Lila. His eyes widened at the mention of her name. You wouldn't dare. A slow, vindictive smile spread across my face. Try me. For several tense moments we stared each other down, the air thick with animosity and unspoken threats. Finally, Trent broke the silence. "What do you want?" he growled, his arrogance crumbling beneath the weight of his exposure. "What do I want?" I echoed, leaning back in my seat. "I want you to suffer. I want you to experience the same fear, the same humiliation, the same utter despair that you've put me through." His eyes narrowed. "You're delusional if you think—" "I'm not finished," I snapped, cutting him off. "I want full custody of the kids, and I want the house. Every last dime you've stashed away is going into a trust for them, one you'll never be able to touch." Trent's face contorted with rage. "You can't do this to me." "I can and I will," I said, rising from my seat. "Consider this your one and only warning, Trent. Play ball, or I'll make sure you lose everything. Your money, your career, your precious Lila. The choice is yours." With that, I turned on my heel and strode out of the cafe, leaving Trent to stew in the ruins of his shattered plans. A delicious sense of satisfaction washed over me. The game was on, and for once I was in control. As I stepped into the sunlight, Jenna fell into stride beside me, a proud grin on her face. "You were amazing in there," she gushed. "Did you see the look on his face?" I allowed myself a small, victorious smile. "Just the first of many," I assured her. "Trent hasn't seen anything yet." The battle lines had been drawn, and I was just getting started. Trent thought he could outsmart me, could discard me and ride off into the sunset with his little plaything. Well, he was about to learn a very painful lesson. You never underestimate a woman scorned. In the days following my confrontation with Trent, a strange sense of calm settled over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control of my life. No longer a helpless victim, but a woman taking back her power. Trent had gone into hiding, no doubt licking his wounds and plotting his next move. But I wasn't worried. The ball was in my court now, and I had no intention of playing by his rules. It was during this period of quiet that an unexpected ally emerged. Lila herself. The cheery ring of my doorbell one afternoon heralded her arrival, and I must admit I was taken aback by her presence on my doorstep. "Lila," I said, fighting to keep my voice even. "What a surprise." She offered me a hesitant smile. Her eyes clouded with uncertainty. "I know this is awkward, but I was hoping we could talk." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside to let her in. Whatever her game, I was curious to see it play out. We settled in the living room, an uneasy silence stretching between us. Finally, Lila spoke up. I saw Trent the other day," she began, her voice small. He was a mess." I arched an eyebrow, intrigued. "Do tell." Lila Worryline creased her brow. "He kept ranting about you, about some kind of evidence you had. Cass, what's going on?" For a moment, I debated how much to reveal, but something in Lila's wide, guileless eyes told me she was just as much a victim of Trent's lies as I was. And so I told her everything, the affair, the financial deception, my plans for vengeance. As the sordid tale tumbled out, I watched Lila's expression shift from confusion, outrage. "That lying son of a bitch," she spat when I'd finished, her hands clenched into tight fists. "He told me. He said he was going to divorce you, that we could finally be together without any secrets." I couldn't help but bark out a bitter laugh. Looks like Trent was playing us both for fools. Tears glistened in Lila's eyes, but they were born of anger rather than sorrow. "What are you going to do?" A slow, vindictive smile spread across my face. "I'm going to burn his entire world to the ground, and I could use a partner in crime." Lila's eyes widened, but she didn't recoil from the implied offer. If anything, her gaze grew more determined. "I'm in," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "That bastard needs to pay for what he did to us." And just like that, an unlikely alliance was forged. Two women, once pitted against each other, now united in their quest to take down the man who had betrayed them both. Over the next few days, Lila and I pored over every shred of evidence, every damning document, crafting a meticulous plan to completely dismantle Trent's life. We would strike at his finances, his reputation, his very way of life. No stone would be left unturned. Revenge took on an entirely new meaning as Lila and I worked in tandem. What I lacked in knowledge of Trent's personal life, she more than made up for, and what she couldn't provide in terms of resources, I gladly supplied. With each passing day, our bond grew stronger, fortified by our shared trauma and an unshakable thirst for justice. We were an unstoppable force. and Trent would soon feel the full brunt of our wrath. As we put the finishing touches on our scheme, Lila turned to me, her eyes blazing with determination. "You ready to make that bastard pay?" she asked, her voice laced with anticipation. I flashed her a wolfish grin. "More than ready. Let's light this candle." Trent's downfall was all but assured. He thought he could play us, could shatter our lives without consequence. Well, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The game was afoot, and we were playing for keeps. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than I expected. Lila and I had meticulously plotted every move, gathered every shred of evidence, and laid the trap with exquisite precision. All that was left was to spring it, and watch as Trent's world came crashing down around him. It began with a series of anonymous tips to the IRS, detailing the intricate web of offshore accounts and shady financial dealings we'd uncovered. Within days, the auditors were swarming, and Trent's once immaculate records were being picked apart. Next, we leaked the incriminating text messages and hotel receipts to the local media, along with photos and videos that left no doubt as to the tawdry nature of Trent's affair. His sleazy exploits were plastered across every newspaper and news channel, his indiscretions laid bare for the world to see. I'll never forget the look on his face when he stormed through my front door that fateful morning, his eyes wild with panic and rage. "You crazy bitch," he roared, spittle flying from his lips. "What have you done?" I rose from the couch, unfazed by his outburst. "Me? I haven't done anything, Trent. I'm just an innocent party in all of this." His gaze shifted to Lila, who stood beside me, her arms folded across her chest in defiant solidarity. "You," he snarled, rounding on her. "You did this, didn't you? You vindictive little—" "Watch your mouth," I warned, stepping between them. "Your quarrel is with me, not her." Trent's face contorted in an ugly sneer. "This isn't over, Cass. Not by a long shot. You think you've won, but I'm going to bury you. I'll take the kids, the house, everything." I wouldn't be so sure about that. The new voice belonged to my lawyer, Mr. Davidson, who strode into the room with a grim expression. "Mr. Davidson?" Trent sputtered, his bravado faltering. "What's going on here?" The lawyer fixed him with a withering stare. "What's going on, Mr. Monroe, is that your underhanded financial dealings have been brought to light. The IRS is already preparing charges of tax evasion and fraud, and that's just the tip of the iceberg." Trent's face drained of color. But my money is being seized as we speak," Mr. Davidson continued, relentless, "along with your assets, your property, and quite possibly your freedom." "You can't do this," Trent cried, panic lending a shrill edge to his voice. "I'll fight this. I swear to God." Mr. Davidson shook his head, his lips curling into a thin, humorless smile. "I'd save my energy if I were you, Mr. Monroe. The evidence against you is overwhelming, and it's only a matter of time before the other shoes drop." As if on cue, Trent's phone began ringing incessantly, no doubt a barrage of calls from his frantic colleagues and erstwhile lovers. With shaking hands, he pulled it from his pocket, his eyes widening in horror as he scanned the incoming messages. No, this can't be happening. But it was. His sordid affairs, his financial crimes, every last skeleton he'd tried so desperately to keep buried, was being violently exhumed and laid bare for all to see. In that moment, I allowed myself a fleeting sense of triumph. We had well and truly dismantled Trent's life, bringing him to his knees just as he had done to me. As the reality of his downfall set in, Trent turned to me, his eyes burning with impotent fury. "You won't get away with this," he spat, his words laced with venom. "I'll make you pay if it's the last thing I do." I met his gaze, unflinching. "I'm counting on it." With a dismissive flick of my hand, I turned away, signaling the end of our interaction. Trent had been utterly destroyed, both personally and professionally, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The battle was won, and I had emerged victorious, lean, resolute, and unbowed by his attempts to break me. As Trent was led away, Mr. Davidson turned to me, a grudging respect in his eyes. "Well played, Mrs. Monroe," he murmured. "Well played indeed." Lila's hand found mine, giving it a gentle squeeze as we watched the shattered husk of a man disappear. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but I was ready to face it head-on. Trent's betrayal had nearly broken me, but in the end it had gifted me with something far more precious, the strength to fight for myself and my future. As I looked toward the dawn of new beginnings, one thought echoed through my mind. Let the karma begin. The weeks following Trent's downfall were a whirlwind of activity. Lawyers, accountants, and investigators swarmed around me, dismantling the tangled web of deceit he'd so carefully constructed. With each passing day, new revelations of his misdeeds came to light, and the full extent of his betrayal became glaringly apparent. Through it all, I remained stoic and resolute, my thirst for vengeance tempered by a growing sense of relief. The nightmare was finally over, and I could begin to rebuild my life on my own terms. Lila proved to be an invaluable ally during this turbulent time. We grew closer than I ever could have imagined, bound by our shared trauma and the knowledge that we had taken down a true monster together. "You're one tough cookie, Cass," she remarked one evening as we shared a glass of celebratory wine. "I don't know how you managed to keep it together through all of this." I allowed myself a rueful smile. Believe me, there were times when I wanted to curl up and just disappear, but then I'd remember what that bastard put us through, and it would harden my resolve all over again. Lila nodded, her expression somber. "He'll get what's coming to him. The courts, the law, they'll make sure of that." "I hope so," I murmured, swirling the rich liquid in my glass. "But part of me wants more than just a court ruling or a prison sentence." Lila arched an eyebrow, intrigued. "What did you have in mind?" A slow, predatory smile spread across my face. A little taste of his own medicine. The opportunity to exact my ultimate revenge came sooner than expected. One crisp autumn evening, a familiar figure appeared on my doorstep, a haggard, broken shell of the man who had once sworn to love and cherish me. "Cass," Trent rasped, his eyes sunken and haunted. "We need to talk." I eyed him warily, taking in his disheveled appearance and the stench of cheap whiskey that clung to him. "Talk," I echoed, unable to keep the disdain from my voice. "About what exactly?" "Your complete and utter disgrace." He flinched as if I'd struck him, but soldiered on. "Please, Cass, I'm begging you. Give me a chance to explain, to make things right." Despite my better judgment, I allowed him to enter, if only to witness the full extent of his pathetic groveling. Trent sank into the nearest chair, his hands trembling as he struggled to collect his thoughts. "I've lost everything," he croaked, his voice thick with emotion. "My job, my money, my reputation, all of it gone, because of my own stupidity and arrogance." I said nothing, watching him impassively as he slowly unraveled. "And Lila," a bitter laugh escaped his cracked lips, "she took off the moment the truth came out, took whatever she could grab and vanished, just like that." "Did you expect anything less?" I asked coolly. "She was using you, just like you used me." Trent's head fell into his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I've made so many mistakes, Cass. Hurt so many people, especially you. He lifted his head, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry for everything. If I could take it all back, I would in a heartbeat." For an endless moment, I simply stared at the broken husk of a man before me, weighing his words and pleas for absolution. Finally, I spoke. "Did you really think some half-baked apology would undo the years of pain and anguish you put me through?" I asked, my voice hard as steel. "The lies, the betrayal, the disrespect. Did you honestly believe a few crocodile tears would absolve you of all that?" Trent opened his mouth, but I silenced him with a sharp gesture. "Save your breath," I spat. "You made your choices, Trent, and now you're living with the consequences. You thought you could just toss me aside like garbage for some younger piece of ass, leave me with nothing while you rode off into the sunset?" I rose from my seat, looming over his shriveled form with a cold, merciless glare. "Well, you were wrong, dead wrong, and now you'll spend every day haunted by that mistake, tormented by the knowledge that you threw away the best thing you ever had on a whim." Trent's head fell once more, his body shuddering with ragged sobs. I felt no pity, no sympathy, only the grim satisfaction of a debt finally paid in full. "Get out," I said, my voice laced with finality. "And don't ever show your face here again." As Trent dragged himself from the house, a broken and defeated man, I turned to find Lila watching from the nearby doorway, her eyes shining with pride. "Well done, Cass," she murmured. "Well done." In that moment, I knew my long journey had finally reached its end. The scales had been balanced, karma restored, and I had emerged victorious. It was, in every sense of the word, a new beginning. The weeks following Trent's pathetic attempt at reconciliation were a whirlwind of activity. With the legal matters finally resolved and my financial security assured, I found myself facing an unfamiliar sensation: freedom. For the first time in years, I was truly unshackled from the weight of Trent's betrayal and manipulation. The future stretched out before me, vast and full of possibility. Lila remained a constant presence during this period of transition, her unwavering support and friendship proving invaluable as I navigated the uncharted waters of my new life. "You've come so far, Cass," she remarked one sunny afternoon as we strolled through the park near my home. "Just look at you. You're practically glowing." I couldn't help but smile at her observation. It was true, the haunted, hollow-eyed woman I'd been in the depths of my turmoil seemed like a distant memory. "I owe it all to you, you know," I said, giving her hand an affectionate squeeze. "If it wasn't for your help, your courage, I might never have found the strength to take Trent down." Lila waved off the praise with a dismissive gesture. "Don't sell yourself short. The fire was always there. I just helped fan the flames a little." Her words rang true. The past year had been a crucible, a trial by fire that had forged me into a stronger, more resilient version of myself. The insecurities and self-doubts that had once held me back were gone, replaced by an unshakable sense of confidence and self-worth. As we continued our stroll, I couldn't help but marvel at how far I'd come. From the depths of despair and betrayal to a life brimming with promise and possibility, it was almost too much to comprehend. "So, what's next for the indomitable Cassidy Monroe?" Lila asked, a teasing lilt to her voice. I considered her question for a moment, letting the warm spring breeze caress my face. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "For the first time in a long while, I don't have some grand plan or objective mapped out. I think I'd like to just live, you know? Enjoy this new lease on life, stop and smell the roses for a change." Lila's face split into a broad grin. "Sounds like a plan to me. Just promise you won't become a complete hermit, okay? I need my partner in crime around to keep me on my toes." I laughed, the sound rich and uninhibited. "Deal." As the weeks melted into months, I relished the simple joys that had once eluded me. Lazy Sunday mornings, impromptu girls' nights out with Leela and Jenna, quality time with my children. Each day was a gift, unburdened by the specter of Trent's lies and manipulation. Of course, there were moments when the past would creep up on me, uninvited flashes of pain and heartache that threatened to reopen old wounds. But I found solace in the knowledge that I had persevered, that I had taken my life back from the brink and emerged stronger than ever. Trent was little more than a ghost, a lingering shadow that grew fainter with each passing day. I refused to afford him any more power over me or my happiness. As for his ultimate fate, I cared little. Rumor had it he'd slunk off to parts unknown, his wealth and reputation in tatters. A part of me hoped he was suffering, dwelling in the pit of his own making, but the larger part simply didn't give a damn. He was a specter of the past, and I was too busy embracing my future to dwell on him any longer. With Lila by my side, I embarked on a new chapter, one filled with new adventures, new joys, and a newfound sense of liberation. The road ahead was unknown, but for the first time in ages, I greeted the uncertainty with open arms and a radiant smile. Wherever life took me, I knew one thing for certain. The specters of the past held no power over me. I was the master of my destiny, the author of my own story. And this time, I was writing one hell of an ending.